I see we are recording now.
Yes. And Evan, if you could bring up that first page of the agenda, that would be helpful.
I see we are recording now.
Yes. And Evan, if you could bring. And on the screen right now, you can see the first page of the agenda. And if you can make that a little bit larger, that would be great. And just a note for the record that our meeting is being conducted in accordance with the State of California Executive Order N-29-20, dated March 17, 2020. All of the committee members will participate via video conference. There's going to be no physical meeting place for this meeting, no place for community members to meet as well. This is all, of course, due to the COVID-19 restrictions that are in place. We have listed here the various ways to get into the meeting. Evan is serving as our producer for this meeting. So if you want to ask questions, you have your hand raised signal that you can use if you're on screen. And then Evan, if you could just scroll down a little bit so that we can show right there. If you're on the phone, you can press *9 and raise your hand. And then Evan will see that and allow you into the meeting. If you, Evan, could bring up the email from Karen Chapman, that'd be great. Two things that I want to bring to the table's attention.
Steve,
would be,
we're having a little trouble hearing you.
Okay, indicating that, well, actually, I'm going to turn my video off. Hopefully this will help clean up my voice signal. Yeah, so we received this email from Karen Chapman on the 20th of October to the entire roundtable, and of course, the chair indicating that their office, Representative Eshu's office, has requested the FAA defer briefings to the roundtable on issues impacting Santa Cruz County until next year in light of the ongoing crisis in Santa Cruz County relating to the devastating CZU fire and its ongoing impacts. All the constituents impacted by the CZU fire should have the ability to participate in FAA briefings. And right now, thousands of them are without water, power, and housing. And of course, it's a horrible situation. Our hearts go out to them. Karen says, thank you in advance for your understanding, given the situation faced by so many constituents. Our office, with help from some of our colleagues, have been working 7 days a week on site in Santa Cruz County to help the victims register with FEMA. It's been very hard to see so many in need of truly basic services. And so I wanted the roundtable to be aware of that. And then separately, just today, we received a letter from the regional administrator. And you may recall that at our last meeting in July, the chair was charged with putting together a letter requesting that we get a full briefing on the SUR for Big Sur overlay process based on the briefing that we got from the FAA in July. And as you can see here, Regional Administrator Gerben says, thank you for your letter dated August 11, 2020, in which you requested a production schedule and presentation by the FAA at the Santa Clara of Santa Cruz County's Airport Community Roundtable meeting on October 28, 2020, which of course is today. Representative Eshu's office, with the support of other members, asked the FAA to defer that briefing until next year due to the impacts of the fires in Santa Cruz County, and to wait until such time that all constituents have the opportunity to participate. The FAA will attend the meeting on October 28th, 2020, and although we are delaying our presentation as requested, please be assured that the internal agency continues to work for this procedure request. We look forward to presenting the material at a future roundtable meeting. I bring these two up so that the entire roundtable is aware of them. I know a lot of information goes into your packets. You may not see these items, and certainly the one from Regional Administrator Gerben came in just this morning. and also to make the public aware of this request and where the FAA stands in terms of being able to make presentations. Given that I'm just kicking off the meeting, we're not going to discuss this now, but certainly it's a topic that if members do wish to discuss it, we can bring it up during the member discussion portion of the meeting. And with
Steve,
that, yes.
Steve, I think this is relevant to part of my report and the discussion on the technical working group. So I think there's an appropriate place for us to have some conversation there.
That sounds fine.
Thank you.
And with that, Chair Burnell, I'll turn it over to you to officially start the meeting.
Yes, I will call the meeting to order. Thank you, Steve. Definitely our hearts go out to everyone affected by these fires here in the Bay Area and definitely throughout all the state, even Colorado. I mean, it's been a horrible year. That said, I will call this meeting to order and ask, well, I guess best I will identify you as I can see you on my screen, and ask you to indicate that you can hear us and that you are participating and you are who you are. And so, Anita.
That's me, I'm here.
Okay. Lydia Koo.
Here.
Informality, but it seems appropriate today. Lisa Matichek. There we go.
I'm here.
Okay.
Thank you.
Geez. Glenn, you were there and then you disappeared on my screen. You're there. Okay.
I'm here and I'm who I am.
Good. Okay, sliding by. Lydia Koo.
Yes, I'm here.
Okay. Liang Chow.
I'm here.
Steve Preminger.
Here.
Okay. That is it that I see here, who are the elected official representatives for our roundtable.
We have Kathy Watanabe.
Oh, Kathy, I am sorry. There you go. I need a picture. I need a picture of you. Thank you. Have I missed anybody else?
And Chair, you're present as well, which means that we have a quorum.
Yes, and I am here, and I think I am who I am today, but we'll hope for it. All right, so we have called to order. We also have some staff members here today from ESA. Steve, would you introduce us, please?
Sure. You, of course, know and have worked with Evan Wasserman quite a bit. He is, as I mentioned a little bit earlier, our meeting producer today. So he'll be doing the work behind the scenes to recognize people who are asking questions and those types of things. Along with him, assisting him, is Phoebe Wyman. Phoebe is also a member of our ESA Airports group, and she will be taking on the role of note taker today, which Evan usually does. And then also joining us is Chris Sequeira. Chris will be giving you the flight track dispersion 101 presentation. Chris is a former employee of the Federal Aviation Administration, Air Traffic Organization. He also worked within the Office of Environment and Energy for a number of years. So it's exciting to have Chris here to do this presentation. He's also our backup facilitator. You haven't seen Chris, I think, since the first meeting, but he's worked on a number of items that have come before you, including the IIT Gateway and other items as well. So excited to have Chris along with us today.
Very pleased. I also will note that we have Bert Ganong. Beth White, I don't know if you're a community member or associated with an agency. Eric Henshaw from Representative Anna Eshu's office. I'm going down the list. If Chris Zanardi from Supervisor Joe Simidian's office. Linda Wolin, I believe from Supervisor Dave Pine's office. Sky Laren from the FAA, Tamara Swan, and Tom Pike from Representative Khanna's office. If I have missed anyone representing any office or the FAA, please chime in so we know that you are here. You can raise your hand. Joseph Burt, can we unmute Joseph so he can tell us who he is, please?
Yes, I'm on from the FAA also.
Wonderful, thank you. Excuse me
Thank
for
you.
not recognizing your name offhand. And I don't see, Joseph Burt, Ivan Gutierrez. Gutierrez.
Yes, hi. Good afternoon. My name is Ivan Gutierrez.
Okay,
I accidentally left that Z out, but I'm the new community engagement officer down in Los Angeles.
thank you. And Tamara Swan. Yes, you are here from the FAA.
Yes, Mary Lynn. I simply wanted to be able to provide an introduction for Ivan. He is the Community Engagement Officer for Southern California. He's here simply to observe and receive some on-the-job training.
Wonderful, thank you.
Thank you.
I appreciate the introduction, Tamara, and it's nice to see you all here. I have got to attend to a noise issue. Unfortunately, I'll be right back. Otherwise, I'm going to have a barking dog, and I'm going to have.
We never had a barking dog when we met in person.
My apologies. Timing is everything. Okay. You were doing a wonderful segue, Steve Alverson, to our item number 3, the Flight Track Dispersion 101. Please go ahead, Chris.
And Mary Lynn, we're hearing a lot of dog barking in the background, if that's your dog.
I will mute myself now. She is out of the room and locked out, but this will occur for a few more minutes. So please go ahead.
Thank you.
Thank you, Steve, and thank you everybody for having me here today. And thank you, Evan, for running the slides during my presentation. If you could just go ahead and maximize that view. Thanks very much.
And Chris, if you could speak up a little bit, you're a little hard to hear.
Just 1 second, I probably have to adjust some volume settings that have reset themselves yet again. Pardon me, I'll do that in the next 10 seconds here.
I know you're normally soft-spoken, but we must hear you during this presentation.
Okay, so my name is Chris Sequeira. I'm with Environmental Science Associates, ESA's Airports Group, and I've been at ESA since April of 2016. And as Steve Alverson mentioned earlier, I am formerly with the Federal Aviation Administration. I was in FAA headquarters in Washington, D.C. from August of 2009 till about March of 2016. I spent most of my time in the Office of Environment and Energy, first as a air quality research project manager. My background is aircraft performance and emissions. And I then went to the Air Traffic Organization and not only worked on the FAA's environmental policy document, FAA Order 1050.1, but also assisted with the developing community outreach improvement activities for various parts of FAA's air traffic projects. So I come to this presentation with a background in the FAA's processes. I should say a subset of the FAA's processes is, of course, the FAA is a very large organization, but certainly I'm not here as a representative of the FAA by any means. And everything that I'm going to talk about today is, first of all, publicly available, and secondly, our projects. There will be some example projects here, but those are projects that I have not personally worked on. So the things I know about them are the things that you will see in this presentation. Can we go to the next slide, please? Just a brief outline. This presentation is going to be about 40 minutes, and I want to make room for a question and answer session at the end. Basic outline of this presentation: how do aircraft navigate? That background is important in order to talk with context about the flight track dispersion. We will talk about what is flight track dispersion, and then I'll talk about a few special cases of dispersion that have been in the media over the last several years, and provide a little bit of context to those special projects. Next slide, please. Some basic overview on how aircraft navigate. There are essentially two categories of rules that pilots operate by in the United States of America or in the National Airspace System, or NAS, as seen up here on the screen. Title 14 of the Code of Federal Regulations, Part 91, formerly known as Federal Aviation Regulations Part 91, or FAR Part 91, specifies what those rules are for operating in the NAS. Visual flight rules enable pilots to operate by visual reference to the sky and ground. That's only when weather conditions allow. And instrument flight rules, or IFR, enable pilots to operate by referencing aircraft navigation instruments that are on the flight decks of their aircraft. And that is when weather conditions do not permit VFR operation. However, I will go ahead and add that there are certain benefits to navigating by IFR even when the weather is good. And we'll talk a little bit about that in a second. Next slide, please. So the fundamentals of VFR, as I mentioned earlier, are navigation by visual reference to the sky, ground, and objects. It requires specific weather conditions that I'm not going to go into detail in here, but the part of the regulation that describes that situation or those conditions is 14 CFR Part 91.155, which lists things like mandatory distance from clouds, required distance of visibility, and other associated weather conditions. Very importantly, it requires pilots, typically requires pilots to take their own responsibility for seeing and avoiding aircraft and other obstacles. Next slide. In contrast, fundamentally, IFR is about navigation by reference to aircraft instruments, which the pilot essentially has on board the aircraft. And so those span a wide range of aircraft equipment types, but fundamentally, you must have an altimeter, you must have an attitude indicator, which essentially indicates the aircraft's roll and where the nose is pointing, above or below the horizon. And then typically, there must also be electronic navigation equipment on board, and we'll talk in detail about the type of equipment and what that means for aircraft flight tracks. Having this equipment enables navigation in adverse weather conditions, so situations where you can't see the ground basically. And very importantly, air traffic control at the FAA typically takes responsibility for separating aircraft from other aircraft and obstacles. So the pilot maintains positive contact with air traffic control and receives and follows the instructions of air traffic control in order to guarantee separation from aircraft, from obstacles, which could be buildings or terrain. Importantly, commercial aircraft usually fly under IFR, and they do so even when the weather is good, because it provides flexibility in air traffic controllers managing the airspace. And the honest truth is, with the speeds that commercial jets operate at, even in perfect visual conditions, if you see another aircraft heading your way, it may be too late to do anything about it because of the speeds involved. So commercial aircraft usually fly under IFR even in good weather. So a very important part of IFR navigation in the NAS is the instrument flight procedure. And this is a standard set of instructions for IFR navigation. It's essentially the pilot's version of a map that you might find on Google Maps or Apple Maps or in a plain old traditional map book. And similarly to that map book that you might use when driving, IFPs usually include reference locations for navigation. However, in contrast to what you have in a car where you have street signs and other things as your reference points, an IFP uses specific locations that are typically ground-based navigational aids or nav aids, which use radio beacons to help pilots navigate, or waypoints, which can be informed by two things. The first is intersecting radio beacons from ground-based navigational aids, or coordinates that are set up through the global positioning system, and that's a satellite-based navigation system. And as I mentioned before, IFR Typically, the FAA takes responsibility for separating aircraft from each other and from terrain and obstacles. And IFP essentially builds in a certain amount of separation right into the procedure. The FAA develops most, but not all IFPs, makes them publicly available to pilots flying in the United States of America for their use. So there are a number of benefits to using IFPs. A key benefit is that it reduces verbal communications between pilots and air traffic control. So imagine reading a map in your hand versus somebody telling you on the phone to drive down this street and turn here and then go 5 miles this way and turn there. So the reduction of verbal communication means lower workload and also means fewer errors. And that's a benefit that also essentially is a safety benefit for both the pilot of the aircraft in navigation and other aircraft in the vicinity of that pilot. IFPs improve predictability of aircraft locations because in navigating via this map, so to speak, there's a certain repeatability that's built into that. And IFPs actually retain flexibility for air traffic controllers who nearly always have the ability to vector aircraft from different directions onto IFPs or vector aircraft that are on IFPs off of those IFPs for various reasons. Next. There are a variety of IFPs that are in use in the National Airspace System, but there are three types that are very common in the vicinity of airports. And the point of these IFPs is to help aircraft arrive to and depart from airports. So on the departure side, we have SIDs, which are standard instrument departures. Their purpose is to guide aircraft from the airport runway to a higher altitude, or the en route environment, as we typically say. STARS do almost the opposite. STARS are standard terminal arrival routes. They guide aircraft from the en route environment to the vicinity of an airport. But in contrast to a SID, which essentially takes an aircraft from the runway up to the cruise environment, the STARS work in conjunction with instrument approach procedures, or IAPs, to get aircraft from the en route environment to the runway. Next slide, please. And there are also different technologies used for IFPs, and the heritage technology, if you will, is an IFP that we now call a conventional IFP, which requires ground-based navigational aids, or these are radio transmitters essentially. Those navigational aids broadcast radio beacons, and those radio beacons are picked up on the aircraft, and pilots are trained to use those beacons as sources of information for navigating. It typically requires that aircraft directly overfly the navigational aid, and that limits flexibility in where you can put an aircraft flight path in an IFP. Furthermore, the accuracy of navigation varies with distance between the aircraft and navigational aid. The closer you are to the nav aid, the more accurate it is. As you increase the distance from that nav aid, the navigation accuracy goes down, and that's fundamental to the physics of how radio beacons work. Next. In contrast, the other technology used for IFPs is known as area navigation, or RNAV. It's an IFP that features aircraft navigation unconstrained by the locations of ground-based nav aids. Now, it typically relies on satellite-based navigation through GPS, though I will add that RNAV GPS is not a requirement. It's actually possible to do a version of RNAV with ground-based navigational aids, and that was done many decades ago. But nearly all procedures now are GPS-based. And the reason is because GPS navigation does not vary with distance between aircraft and waypoint, and that permits greater navigation accuracy. Many commercial airports feature RNAV SIDS, STARS, and instrument approach procedures. And you'll see here the diagram on the right that because GPS navigation does not vary in accuracy with the distance between an aircraft and a waypoint, you can essentially tighten up the uncertainty boundaries and better predict where aircraft will be. And that improves the use of airspace, which is known as airspace efficiency. Next slide. So given those benefits, RNAV is very important to the FAA. And as a matter of fact, it's a key enabler for the FAA's NextGen, and that's based on the FAA's own published documents about NextGen and why NextGen is being implemented. The essential purpose of NextGen is to improve the capacity, performance, efficiency, and predictability of aircraft operations in the national airspace system. The FAA states up front that it has switched to a primarily satellite-enabled navigation system that is more precise than traditional ground-based nav aids. And the increased precision of RNAV is essentially necessary to the FAA to help the FAA meet the NextGen goals, the 4 goals that you see up in the second bullet there. Next slide. Another key reason why RNAV is very important to the FAA is that implementation of RNAV procedures is mandated by the US Congress. The FAA's Modernization and Reform Act of 2012 required the FAA to implement RNAV IFPs at the 35 busiest airports, or the OEP 35, before June 30th of 2015. Now, this process is still in progress. I will say, though, that the San Francisco International Airport in the region is certainly one of the busiest in the country. In 2012, it was the 7th busiest airport in the United States. Next slide, please. So what is flight track dispersion exactly? Typically, when we use that term, we're talking about variation of aircraft locations along the center line of an IFP horizontally. So in other words, to the left or the right of a procedure center line. And that results in varying locations of overflights and by extension, varying locations of noise exposure. The gray lines in the example graphic at the left, which is actually departures out of Atlanta Hartsfield International Airport in year 2005, shows visually what this dispersion looks like. So these are historical radar tracks, and you can see that there's a wide variety of locations in which aircraft are departing out of that particular runway end you see there. Next slide. There are a couple of key categories of reasons why dispersion occurs. One reason is instructions from ATC to vector aircraft onto or off of a published IFP. That can cause variation in dispersion if those instructions come at varying times in the aircraft operation, which is very natural. Some IFPs direct aircraft down a common route segment before sending aircraft in different directions based on their destinations. So there are published IFPs, both SIDS and STARS, that have various entry and exit points that can cause dispersion. As an example here, toward the right of the slide, you'll see a graphic in the departure out of Charlotte International Airport, where dispersion shown as the variance in the flight tracks there is likely caused by air traffic control vectoring to take aircraft off of the procedure, which is probably represented by that center line of heavy blue there in the graphic. Next slide. Continuing the discussion of causes of dispersion, ground-based navigational aids provide accuracy that varies with distance, as I'd mentioned previously, and that also causes natural dispersion. In contrast with RNAV IFPs usually using navigation via GPS, which remains accurate regardless of the distance to the waypoints, RNAV IFPs typically concentrate flights into narrow paths. And again, these graphics at the bottom are Atlanta back in the year 2005, just as an example off of one runway end. When the FAA implemented RNAV procedures, the flight track dispersion went from the wide variety of dispersion you see on the left image to the narrow concentrated paths that you see there on the right. And this is inherent to the switch from ground-based navigation technology to satellite-based technology. Next slide, please. There are a few other causes of dispersion that are common. Variations in weather and aircraft performance capabilities can cause dispersion. These variations can affect when different aircraft operations must turn from one reference point to the next. And climb rates and tightness of aircraft turns are also affected by these parameters. So again, going back to the Charlotte example, you see that there is likely an RNAV departure procedure here. However, there are several areas that I have circled there in yellow where there's likely to be some natural dispersion because of different aircraft performance and weather conditions across, let's say, a sample of a year of flight track data. You might see that type of variation. Next slide, please. So just to emphasize the point again, how does RNAV implementation affect dispersion? Because RNAV allows highly accurate, consistent navigation, we would typically see a concentration and narrowing of flight paths when moving from conventional IFPs to RNAV IFPs. And the result is fewer people are overflown, but those same people are overflown much more often. Next slide. So the FAA has written to various groups about the nature of RNAV in relation to dispersion. Here's a particular sample in the FAA's response to the Southern San Fernando Valley Airplane Noise Task Force regarding RNAV IFPs at Burbank and Van Nuys airports. The FAA stated that it is not possible to replicate the kind of random dispersal that occurs when planes are flying using ground-based navigation. In other words, introducing systemic dispersal using satellite-based routes would not achieve the outcome of going back to the way it was. That type of dispersal is no longer possible. So in other words, it's not possible for RNAV IFPs to duplicate the dispersion of conventional IFPs. Next slide, please. Going into a few special cases, special projects. The Charlotte optimization of airspace and procedures in the Metroplex, or OAPM. This project is a little bit before the FAA started using the word Metroplex more often in these types of airspace and procedure redesign projects. In 2015, the FAA published a finding of no significant impact and record of decision for the Charlotte OAPM. And in terms of the FAA's own graphics, it appeared that dispersion was added in certain areas. So for example, in the pre-Metroplex departure tracks there on the left, there is what appears to be a narrow concentrated path. And then on the right, you see a post-Metroplex implementation where that concentration has gone away and has been replaced by dispersion. However, if we go to the next, the FAA in its documentation very clearly states, as part of the purpose and need for the project, there are an insufficient number of transitions for existing stars and arrivals from the northwest corner post require greater support. There are also an insufficient number of SIDs. The current SIDs are inefficiently designed and require earlier route divergence to increase departure throughput. So in other words, in Charlotte Metroplex, the FAA added more procedures and dispersion specifically to meet operational efficiency goals rather than noise exposure goals. Next slide. There is a new concept of standard instrument departure known as the open SID. And in 2015, the FAA published criteria for that. It's basically a standard instrument departure that has ATC vectoring in the middle. And that vectoring would disperse flights, functionally disperse flights in the middle of the standard instrument departure. However, this criteria memo very specifically states that OpenSID design criteria should only be used where operationally necessary to achieve airspace efficiencies. So in other words, they're in place to support airspace efficiency goals and not noise exposure goals. Next slide. And finally, relatively recently, Section 175 of the FAA Reauthorization Act of 2018 specifies situations where the FAA shall consider the feasibility of dispersal headings or other lateral track variations for RNAV departures below 6,000 feet if several criteria are met. First of all, the FAA has to receive a request from an airport operator in consultation with an affected community. Secondly, the FAA has to make the judgment that this airport operator's request would not conflict with the safe and efficient operation of the national airspace system. And third, the FAA has to judge that the modified departure as proposed by the airport would not significantly increase noise over noise-sensitive areas. So functionally, Section 175 does not mandate the FAA to add dispersion to flight procedures. It only asks that the FAA consider the feasibility if these three key criteria that are dictated in the law are met. So in summary, the importance of RNAV to the FAA is that implementation of RNAV helps the FAA meet its next-gen goals and also respond to the mandate from Congress to implement RNAV procedures at some of the busiest airports in the country. It is functionally and physically not possible for RNAV IFPs to duplicate the type of dispersion observed with conventional IFPs. It's essentially inherent to the technology types and how they differ. In special cases, the FAA has added dispersion to IFPs, but that's specifically to meet operational efficiency goals. And per Section 175 of the FAA Reauthorization Act of 2018, the FAA is required to consider adding dispersion to RNAV SIDs in certain circumstances, but is not mandated to do so. And it's our judgment that the FAA is unlikely to retain or add dispersion to IFPs unless necessary to meet next-gen goals. Questions?
Mary Lynn, you're muted.
Sorry, I got the video on, but not the mute. The normal procedure for us is to have the members of the roundtable ask questions first. I'm going to go to that group and look for raised hands. After our questions are considered, then I will open it up to the community. And at this point, I'm looking for any raised hands from our panelists, and I see Lydia Koo. Please go ahead, Lydia.
Thank you. I was hoping somebody else would go before me, but taking too long to wait for a hand to come up. So first question I wanted to ask is so I see most of this has been about departures on the dispersion. And first I want to say, I'm sorry, I apologize for not saying thank you for this presentation. I really appreciate bringing it forward. But I wanted to ask that there was a letter that was sent to Steve and the roundtable back in September to ask if we could concentrate this more on the arrivals for the Bay Area. It seems like this presentation covers a lot of departures. So would there be examples based on arrivals that happens here in the Bay Area?
Well, the challenge with dispersion upon arrival is is twofold. So firstly, even with an RNAV star, there is a need to get aircraft in specific locations relative to the airport, or I should say, sometimes the language of corner posts is used. So specific quadrants around the airport, northeast, south, west, etc., so that air traffic control can properly sequence and separate aircraft so that they arrive at the right time and at the right place. An interesting observation about air traffic management. So if there are delays for any reason, typically for weather, as an example, thunderstorms in the summertime, departure delay can be managed on the ground by telling aircraft to depart maybe later than they otherwise would. But delay on the arrival side has to be managed in the air. So air traffic control needs space and room to manage aircraft arrivals in terms of how quickly they arrive. And that can be exacerbated in situations where air traffic control does not have options to move aircraft to different parts. Now, I don't recall the last or whether recently the Roundtable has looked at graphics of historical flight tracks, but it is common for an RNAV star to put aircraft on a concentrated path into the airport environment and then essentially bring them to a point where air traffic control turns the aircraft and place them on a final approach procedure. So you will often see that if you look at historical flight tracks as dispersion on arrival. So in a particular example, I know I don't have any visuals and I'm sorry for that, but in a particular example, imagine that aircraft are following an RNAV star that takes them parallel to the airport, parallel to their arriving runway, typically referred to as a downwind leg. So the aircraft is flying downwind, which is with the wind, flying parallel to their arriving runway and heading away from the airport. At a certain point, air traffic control will turn those aircraft by telling them to turn toward the airport and intercept the final approach course. Now, naturally, that type of instruction will come for different aircraft at different times, and that will cause arrival dispersion. But once aircraft are aligned with the runway, and this maybe gets to your point, once aircraft are aligned with the runway, they essentially have to be lined up for a number of miles before they can touch down. And that's for reasons of safety. So once aircraft intercept that final approach course, or in other words, once aircraft line up with the runway, they don't really stray from that, and that's for safety. There are very rare situations where aircraft will turn toward the airport within a few miles, but that's very rare, and particularly it's much more rare for heavier aircraft to do that than it is for, as example, small piston type aircraft. There are just limited opportunities for dispersion close to the airport, and it's for safety, it's for reasons of air traffic efficiency, it's for reasons of...
Chris, you cut out. We can't hear you. It looks like you're muted, Chris.
Okay.
There you go. You're unmuted.
Yeah, something took away my cursor here. Okay, so I'm sorry for that. What's the last thing that you heard?
It is difficult for the aircraft when it's approaching the airport to line up to the runway.
Yeah, it is difficult for the aircraft to line up with the runway unless it has a number of miles to do so. And the number of miles required depends on the air traffic environment. It depends on the type of aircraft, but it could be 5 miles, 10 miles, but it's not 1 mile or 2 miles. It's some large number that a heavy aircraft going at 180 to 200 miles an hour needs in order to properly line up and have what aircraft operators call a stabilized approach to the runway. And as a matter of fact, a number of aircraft operators have a company policy on when aircraft must be stabilized. It could be within 1,000 feet of altitude. It could be within 800 feet of altitude. It could be within a number of miles from the runway. I'm not an airline pilot, so I can't speak to that in detail. But there are many airlines that will not accept certain procedures that do not put them on a stabilized approach within a specific distance and altitude to the airport. So dispersion opportunities for arrivals are very limited because of that.
You said that because of the aircraft type and so forth, it can, if there's more miles from the airport to bring it in line with the runway, there's an opportunity for dispersion. But if it's only a few miles away, such as below 5 miles or so forth, then it becomes difficult, correct? If I understood that correct.
What I would say is that I would answer that in two parts. The first part is going back to the star. So an RNAV star, touching the fundamentals of what I talked about in the presentation, the benefit of an RNAV star is to put aircraft efficiently in one place while using the airspace, using as little of the airspace as possible, and particularly in an area like the Bay Area where there are a number of airports that are not too far from each other, that becomes very important. So RNAV stars actually help the FAA use the airspace efficiently and keep the airports in the area operating at their most efficient. Now, in turning an aircraft from the star to the final approach procedure, there is some natural dispersion just because for different operations, the aircraft may be turned at different points. But once the aircraft lines up with the runway, whether it's 5 miles out or 10 miles out or 20 miles out or 30 miles out, the aircraft is not going to come off of that runway end unless there's a very unique and probably rare reason for doing that. So you would see a narrow flight track aligned with the runway, and that's basically just due to the nature of a safe and efficient operation.
Thank you for that. Thank you for that. Because once it lines up, then there's less chance of it deviating from that path. But then while it's still being, when it comes to the star and then turning, there's still opportunities perhaps for dispersion is what I am gathering. But I appreciate that. Thank you.
And what I would also say, just as a quick, as a very small addendum to that, is that the opportunities for dispersion are the same opportunities that you would already observe. So in other words, adding dispersion to that is probably not likely beyond whatever dispersion you would already see in the existing operation.
I see. Thank you. Then on slide 20, it says that the RNAV procedure cannot duplicate the dispersion of conventional procedures, right? So I understand that given RNAV procedures concentrate the traffic in a narrow corridor, however, from a technical perspective, could the FAA split one procedure into, say, 3, for instance, to disperse the planes? Can they create more tracks?
The FAA could do that, and that actually goes to the Charlotte example where the FAA appeared to create additional tracks. But what you would have is additional narrow track. It wouldn't be a wide array of varying tracks the way that you would see with conventional procedures. And the irony about that is once going from the conventional IFT to an RNAV IFT, if you were to add tracks, you would actually increase the workload for air traffic controllers and pilots versus the conventional situation. because in the conventional IFP, dispersion is inherent to the operation. Whereas with RNAV, you would have to add dispersion essentially by designing multiple procedures like you're proposing, and that would add workload versus the conventional situation.
Okay. Okay, that's not good. And, you know, through all these procedures, I mean, I'm kind of getting that, for example, when you noted on page slide 23 and 24 that the SIDS are operational, more for operational efficiency rather to reduce noise. So here at the roundtable, we're interested at how we could reduce noise for communities through dispersion. So beyond, you know, legislative mandates, what suggestions do you have for us? Yeah.
Well, perhaps it's not the answer you would hope for, but I actually think that this roundtable is the exact perfect forum for that type of thing, because it provides a forum for the FAA to communicate about the way in which different projects are run and some of the FAA priorities, and come to understand in general what the concerns are in the vicinities of these different airports. Now, our read, and again, I'm not representing the FAA here, I'm not speaking on FAA policy as if I know what the policy is. Our read, just based on publicly available information like shown in this presentation, is that whenever the FAA adds dispersion or appears to add dispersion, it's to help the FAA meet its goals of efficient and safe use of the airspace. So noise-related goals would have to be in parallel to that. So if the noise-related goal were somehow opposite or orthogonal to the FAA's goal of managing a safe and efficient NAS, it's unlikely to be implemented. But again, I'm not speaking for any FAA representatives here. It's just a sense that we've gleaned from these particular project examples that are fairly recent in the FAA's management of the airspace.
So Lydia, if I may,
Thank
give you a second to, if there's anything more, but having to do with the noise section of this discussion. Chris, are you saying then that perhaps our efforts as a roundtable are better spent or should be spent? I'm not trying to be qualitative here. Discussing the noise metrics, DNL versus some other, is that what you're suggesting that we as a roundtable do rather than discuss dispersion, which is more in the hands of the FAA and their efficiency model and safety model?
Well, I'd certainly be interested to hear Steve Alverson's thoughts on this. I will say that the recent congressional legislation requires the FAA to do a number of research activities on noise metrics. Steve, if there might be anything, if you're available, things that you might want to elaborate on in that vicinity.
Yeah, and I think the question, Mary Lynn, you're asking is sort of how to allocate roundtable time and resources, you know, for pursuing dispersion, which might be more difficult to obtain than getting changes in metrics or other types of things. And I guess I have a qualified answer. It would depend on the situation. You know, would there be an opportunity in a specific place where dispersion could be used, where it would potentially reduce noise, also help efficiency, and not increase noise for other people? That's the other item that Chris mentioned, is there's a continuing concern by the FAA of increasing noise by dispersing flight tracks as well. So I would say the roundtable would probably look at that on a case-by-case basis, but the case that Chris has made, it sounds like it's a very difficult hill to climb to get dispersion put into post-Metroplex flight tracks.
Thank you, Steve, and thank you, Chris. Lydia, do you have any further questions? No, okay. I see that Glenn Hendricks has raised his hand.
Yeah, I'll just make a couple observations. So Chris, this is really great. You know, I think this is less a discussion of dispersion, but it really would have been nice if you'd have been at one of our very first meetings, because I think you've given a very clear explanation of what happened with NextGen and why we got Rails that happened with noise. So I think a very clear picture of what goes on. I just want to make two other comments. One is a comment was just made here, you know, if we do dispersion, it increases noise. It doesn't increase noise, it moves it around, but we should be very careful about the words we're using. Dispersion does not create noise. It's just where it goes. And to the question of whether or not we should spend any time talking about dispersion, I don't really want to talk about dispersion, but there is an idea that has been, you know, we're trying to see if we can find a way to move through for into San Jose for trying to do something that would not increase the workload to the pilots or the FAA, that would allow us to have multiple different tracks, because what we're talking about is when we're over Mountain View and Sunnyvale and Cupertino, as it relates to SJC, is way before any of the pilots have had to get to that steady state of what goes on. So I think this is a great presentation. It clearly explains how NextGen has worked and has created Rails, but I don't take this as the reason that we can't have a discussion about other options that might be available.
Understood.
Okay. That's all the hands I see from the panelists. Is there anybody else that wants to speak from the roundtable members? I don't see anything now. I'm going to move to the attendees, and I see Sky Laren. Please go ahead and unmute yourself, or I can allow you to talk. Go ahead, please. No, yeah, you have to do it yourself.
I was just unmuted. This is Rob Holbrook.
Can you hear me?
I'm looking for Sky Laren. No, Rob.
Can you
I'll
hear?
call on you later. Yes, I can hear you, Sky.
Okay, great. Yeah, I just wanted to make a point of clarification to Miss Lydia Ku's topic on dispersion and section 175. So the law does not speak to arrivals. I wanted that to be made clear. It's when proposing a new area navigation departure procedure. So the law, section 175, does not speak to arrivals. And that's all I wanted to bring up. Thank you.
Chris, could you respond to that? Does that make anything any different in the answer that you gave, Lydia?
No, I don't think it changes the answer, because fundamentally what I wanted to talk about is just the physical and the technical nature of dispersion on arrivals and whether it's feasible or not. I 100% agree that section 175 is specific to departures, and that's the way that the language is worded.
Okay, good. Ivan Gutierrez, I saw your hand up and then I saw it come down. Oh, was that just a blip? It happens.
No, I didn't have my raise. No.
Okay, then my panel is working weirdly. Robert Holbrook, I see your hand raised. You're at the top of my list. Please unmute yourself.
Thank you. The bedrock principle of my noise advocacy has been that people need the ability to plan when they make big life decisions like where to live. And NextGen upended that because flights are much more concentrated, and I think louder, creating some big losers. I support returning to the dispersion we had before NextGen as much as possible. Today's presentation made clear that's not possible with RNAV. But what's not possible today might be possible tomorrow with new technology. A few years ago, I flew to DC and addressed the NextGen Advisory Committee. I asked them to prioritize research into what I call fine-grained dispersion, enabled by future precision navigation. After the meeting, I spoke with Acting FAA Administrator Elwell, who told me that programmatic dispersion, as he called it, was something the FAA might want to consider. I also mentioned this idea in a meeting I had with Ro Khanna, and he seemed receptive. This is just one of the ideas that the roundtable could propose to our congressional representatives on this topic. Other ideas include allowing alternate procedures that make less noise to be used during off-peak hours, and there are some problems that would need to be resolved with that. maybe extending section 175 to apply to arrivals as well as departures, and there's some issues there too. And perhaps establishing with ground-based noise measurements whether airplanes flown by computerized flight management systems really are louder than the airplanes flown by pilots, which anecdotally certainly seems to be true. I'd like to suggest that the Roundtable pass a motion enabling the Legislative Committee to consider and perhaps propose actions for the Roundtable to consider for returning dispersion as much as possible to pre-next gen levels, if not now, then in the future. I believe this motion would be appropriate at when we get to agenda item number 4. Finally, I'd observe that the Roundtable could ask Congress to clarify FAA priorities with respect to noise. Noise is one of the 3 things that's in the FAA's charter. And to do this particularly with regard to next gen, it does appear that dispersion is possible, but that unless an efficiency objective is given, they're going to say no. Thank you.
Thank you, Rob Holbrook. I need to get back to my panel. I think if it will be agreeable with all the speakers, if Chris will take notes and if he wants to respond at the end of all the questions, that probably will be the best use of our time. Is that good for you, Chris?
Yes, it is.
Yeah,
Okay.
Madam Chair, I will mention that Chris actually has another presentation that he needs to move into as well from this Zoom meeting. So I would say if he could take those questions and then perhaps provide responses afterwards. I don't want to keep him late for another meeting he's supposed to be presenting at right now.
Certainly. Darlene Yapley, 2 minutes. If you would unmute yourself, go ahead, please.
Hi, Chris. Thank you for your informative presentation. I think there is an important opportunity that might be available to us. The SFO airport is implementing GBAS. And as you mentioned, the opportunity to create dispersion has to happen further away from the airport. And if technically we could move the stars further back, we could maximize the opportunity for GBAS to be able to curve and use the bay as opposed to fly over the peninsula. So I would be interested in your technical perspective on how to best optimize the GBAS technology, moving stars, and any other suggestions you have so that we could in fact do dispersion with this new technology. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. The next person I have up is Marie-Jo Fremont.
Thank you. So I have 2 comments. Slide 19, I think, of the presentation said that the result of RNAV procedures are, and I quote, fewer people are overflown, but those people are overflown more often. So my question, because we have to be careful with words, is how is it known that fewer people are affected, given that, number 1, the FAA doesn't look at population densities when making next-gen changes. We learned that in the San Jose South Flow Committee meetings. And number 2, the FAA doesn't look at impacts after the end of a procedure when the planes are vectored. So indeed, the FAA could use population densities all the way to the airport to design routes that would avoid people, but they don't do that with next-gen. As Chris said, efficiency comes first. And what I want to challenge also is using this fewer people argument, fewer people being affected by noise, is not a good justification, because really what matters is the total of noise, the total noise that's impacting people and how that noise is distributed. For instance, our insane level of noise on 1,000 people, is this better than much smaller levels of noise on 20,000 people? No. So using fewer people to justify procedure changes is too simplistic, because you need to look at the changes of the noise levels. If you reduce noise by 0.1 dB for 20,000 people, it's not a good thing if this is going to increase the noise by 5 dBs for 1,000 people. And that's really what next-gen rails did. And my second comment is about the MIT work to disperse traffic for the Boston Logan Airport. ESA didn't mention anything about it, so I'd like to know if they looked at the MIT dispersion study and if there are some learnings that could be extracted for our Bay Area arrivals, given that we are not lined up in our communities with the runways of the airport. Thank you.
Thank you. Jennifer Landesman, please unmute yourself.
Thank you. And Chris, for the presentation. Since you were at the FAA from 2009 and 2016, knowing everything the FAA knew about what was going to happen, why was an environmental impact statement not chosen so that the public could have the benefit of seeing all these things that have not been looked at by the public? And I'm a little bit uncomfortable with how NextGen was pitched to Congress, because if it was similar to all the videos that came out with NextGen at the beginning, I don't know if you recall, but all the videos showed how quiet everything would be, you know, sliding down the banister and everything. So I feel that there's this continuous bait and switch with FAA with the project descriptions, and NextGen's objectives among them were to have a reduction in fuel burn emissions and noise, environmental objectives. Certainly we need environmental objectives in all big infrastructure projects, but I'm really interested in knowing why the FAA does not do a full EIS, because that's what we need at this point. I mean, right now there are 3 airports that do international flights. I mean, is that really necessary? I mean, the communities have to start thinking really hard about what costs are being imposed on citizens, and and align the stories a little bit straighter, because it's really very difficult for the public to understand what happened with NextGen, given that one thing. And one last thing, safety. I mean, NextGen really reduces safety because of the reduction in spacing in airplanes. And while FAA takes responsibility for this, there are some serious safety issues. So we really need an EIS, and I'd like to know what your thoughts are about that. Thank you.
Thank you, Jennifer. We have about 6 minutes to wrap up on this item. Chris, is there any comment that you would like to make at this point?
At this point, I'm just, I'm sorry, I've been typing notes as people have been giving their comments, and we probably want to take a little bit more time to address those as we've got a number of different points here. Thank you, though.
Okay, what is best, Steve, in terms of Chris's schedule and our schedule? We've had a good discussion. We all deeply appreciate Chris's presentation. Is this something that we can get a report on that will be delivered to us at some point in the future?
Yeah, given the fact that Chris is taking notes and Phoebe also taking notes, we could just put together a little white paper or memo responding to those questions.
Do we have to wait until our next meeting, or is that something that we can do?
No, we can get that done before then, definitely.
I see Lydia has raised her hand.
Thank you. I want to thank Ms. Fremont for bringing up the MIT study. So that is a study that's already done. So I look forward to the answer to response, whether the learnings from the MIT study could be applied to arrival noise problems. So thank you. I know that you're due to another presentation, so I won't keep you.
I don't see anyone else's hands raised at this point. Are there any further questions or discussions or requests? I'm seeing a lot of shaking heads. So I think for the, oh, Lisa, yes. Okay, please go ahead.
Thank you. So we heard from the public and Chris, some actions that were taken or some ideas that we might explore. And I'm wondering, is this a time to bring up assigning an action item to the Ledge group to follow up on some of these ideas, to have a discussion and see if there's any that we want to pursue and bring that to the full roundtable to say we want to, pursue these more thoroughly, such as moving STAR back and optimizing GBAS, fine grain dispersion. Is that something that we would discuss at this point, or do we discuss that at a different point on the agenda?
Yeah, I guess my recommendation would be to discuss it during the standing committee report, because we did not list this necessarily as an action item. This is an informational item. It also could be brought up during member discussion as a potential future agenda item as well.
Okay.
So those two spots might be appropriate.
Okay, thanks.
Thanks, Lisa. With that in mind, Steve, I also would like to understand the best way to use this. We have requested that Chris have an ability to respond to the questions and get a full report. That won't happen at this meeting. So I'm looking at the time logistics as to, and that's the reason that I asked when we might get the report to us with the answers to the questions we asked, because that may affect whether we make a motion during the ledge section of the committee reports today, or whether we have to wait for future, which.
Yeah, Chris and I, tomorrow, I would say, we'll talk about the questions that we heard and his workload and what the response would look like, and then I can report back on a time frame. Where to put it within the framework, we're talking a few weeks here, not months. So within a few weeks, we would be able to get a response back. And Chris, you can shake your head if that seems reasonable, knowing what your schedule is. He says
Okay.
yes.
Right. So then with that idea of a response, we could talk then during the ledge section of the committee report as to what we might be hoping to look for. I'm making sure that we are making a correct motion that will work and is informed by the information that we have yet to receive.
Yeah, I think they could potentially be two separate things. I mean, there might be some overlap, but they may be two separate things as well.
Okay, for time's sake, I will go ahead and move on to the next agenda item, which actually is committee reports. I believe we've had all the public comment we need. Yeah, and thank you, Chris.
Yes, thank you.
Very much, greatly appreciated. For the first time in the history of our existence, we are a little bit ahead of time, and I'm going to move forward and take advantage of that. Thank you all. So we are at item number 4, committee reports. First on the agenda is technical working group. Committee chair, Anita Enander. Please, take it away.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, everyone who is here. I want to specifically acknowledge and say I appreciate the people from the FAA as well as our congressional representatives that are here. I would like to just quickly review the assignments and the activities of the technical working group, and then specifically ask for action or confirming action for, I don't know if I can say we would bring us to closure on issues, but at least might move us forward on a couple of things. The first one would be that we did at our technical working group meeting, and subsequent to that meeting, the chair sent a letter regarding SURFR, and Mr. Alveson at the beginning of today's meeting commented on a couple of responses to that came, including Ms. Gerwin's letter of October 28th. I want to acknowledge to Mr. Henschel, who I think is very familiar with that, and also Mr. Pike, to thank you and your Congress members for your diligence and support on this, and to express, I think, a concern that the comment in the letter of the 28th, Ms. Gerwin's letter, is that the FAA will continue to move forward. And I think there's a concern that what could happen with, even given all the understanding of the things that are causing the FAA to reply as they have, there's a concern that if the FAA continues to move forward, but we aren't able to get a briefing, that we would lose some early opportunities to review and have input or comment on procedure development that is so very important to us as a follow-up to the work of the ad hoc committee. So if I can put Mr. Pike on the in the spotlight for a minute, do you have any comments, or perhaps Mr. Henschel, if you do, that might reassure us that by not getting any briefings from the FAA, that we are not going to be precluded from the necessary early and effective input that we thought we might otherwise have.
Anita, I see that Tom Pike's hand is raised.
Thank you.
Tom, would you like to speak? Please unmute
Sure.
yourself. You are good.
Okay, good. Yeah, because the Quiet Skies Caucus does not meet that frequently, and I had entirely anticipated getting a report to the roundtable as to what the results were. And upon inquiring, I was told that the FAA director had requested that it be off the record and that was granted that last meeting. So I kind of shared in your concern about that, because we've got, obviously, the legislative committee here has come up with suggestions that have gone to the Quiet Skies Caucus, and so we're not getting a response on that. However, as was raised at the time, there are some other avenues, some of the committees that do oversee FAA directly, that we addressed the last letter to. And I think what we need to do is pursue all these other avenues in terms of Congress getting a response from the FAA. And then as well, and I know in conversations with Glenn Hendricks, talking about options for more, I would say, direct contact, for example, the congressional offices making direct contact with the FAA and trying to push it directly. So, bottom line, hopefully I'm addressing your question, but I kind of had the impression previously that, we were going to be getting some feedback to you as to what the FAA's response was, and we didn't have that. So we're going to need to pursue other avenues. And I'm glad that you raised that, because it does, I think I can underscore that. I can report to the congressman, look, constituents are looking for a response, and, they need it.
Anita, I see that Tamara Swan's hand is raised. Tamara, if you'd like to unmute yourself, please go ahead.
Thank you, Mary Lynn. Thank you, Anita. I just want to assure you that our response in today's letter, we have every intention of not moving forward without providing you the opportunity to have the briefing and be involved. We wanted to recognize what Karen Chapman had requested a week or two ago as a plight of the community that's severely affected by those procedures.
Thank you, because I think you could understand how that one sentence in Ms. Gerwin's letter might have led us to be a little bit concerned.
So, and honestly, that sentence was worded specifically so that you knew that we weren't just standing by on this.
Right, which I'm sure we all find good, because everyone does want this to move forward. It's just a matter of don't move forward and run out ahead of our involvement. And I appreciate your reassurance, and I'm sure that everyone on the committee, as well as our public, appreciate your reassurances as well.
Absolutely, thank you.
Thank you.
Unless somebody else wants to comment on that, I'll move to the next item.
One hand raised from the attendees. I've got to find out who it is. Nope, it seems to have gone away.
I think it was Tamara's hand. I lowered it. So.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Then please, Anita, go ahead.
Okay. So the next thing that was in our minutes and report from both our meeting and the last full roundtable meeting was a scope on the follow-up on the advisory committee, which is the whole bodega question. And I'd like to make sure that we have concurrence on a letter going there. Let's see. We have a draft in our packet. And I think we're probably best served if we take these one at a time. So I think that what's in order, Madam Chair, is either to get changes to that letter or at least a tentative comment on moving forward. I'm not sure when and how we need to include public comment. And therefore, if I can really do these one at a time, or we need to kind of go through the whole thing and then take public comment once and then come back and move. So that's procedurally up to you and Steve. You're muted, Marilyn.
I would like you just to give us an overview of what the letter is requesting, or Lydia to speak to it briefly.
Yeah, maybe Lydia can do a quick summary. I think the letter's very self-explanatory. Hopefully everybody found it.
Thank you. So at the last July 22nd meeting, we were given approval in order to draft a letter, which I had volunteered to do for the bodega procedure. And there are three main questions that is being asked of the FAA to respond to. With one is, what is preventing air traffic control from using the Bodega East leg more during this period of drastically reduced air traffic volume at San Francisco? We have included in this is a chart that shows that Bodega East arrivals from January through June 2020, that the East arrivals are at 28.4%, whereas the West arrivals is at 71.6%. So it shows here that there is more use of the West leg than the East leg. And so we'd just like to find out, especially in this time, why is it not a 50-50 split, or even a 50-50, right? Then the other question number two is that, is the Bodega East leg down the bay considered integral part of the Bodega arrivals procedure? If not, please explain why not and what needs to happen to change that. Very simple and straightforward. Number three, is the FAA willing to consider changes to enable the use of Bodega East at least 50% of the time? That relates to back to question number one. So essentially, those are just questions that we wanted to, I kind of wanted to pose on behalf of the roundtable, given that it just seems like there isn't equity on the two ends.
Okay, Madam Chair, are there any other comments from our attendees or questions that Lydia could answer regarding the letter? And I want to mention that both Chair Bernald and also Steve have been through and scrubbed this for technical correctness.
Yeah, I was just going to mention, if I might, Madam Chair, if Evan, you can scroll up to that first page. There were two footnotes that were added to the version that Lydia provided, indicating that the FAA historically, and certainly in the select committee, there was the terminology of Bodega East and Bodega West. The FAA sees the Bodega East quite differently than the so-called Bodega West. And the Bodega West is the arrival procedure. It's the STAR, it's the IFP. And so that IFP naturally puts the aircraft on the west side of the airport. What we've become known as Bodega East is what the aircraft do when they're giving a downwind visual on the east side of the airport to land. So just want to note that that's in there both for historical correctness, but it also points out a difference between what's happening in terms of the procedures. The West procedure is an IFP. It's an instrument of flight procedure, as Chris had spoken to us about. And then the East arrival is a visual downwind under visual flight procedures. So just noting that change that was made, and perhaps moving forward, we'll refer to them the language that the FAA prefers to use versus sort of those historical terms.
Thank you, Steve.
Thank you. Anita, I see that Steve Preminger's hand is raised.
Great.
I have no concerns with the letter, just the process. And I was pleased to hear Anita say that both our chair and Steve have gone over the letters. It's always been my contention that anything that comes from the committee should at least have that filter before we send something out. So if that's been achieved, that satisfies me.
Great. Great, Steve. Thanks so much.
Lydia, I see your hand, and then I would like to respond to myself. Steve, can you lower your hand? And Lydia, did you want to say more?
With regards to process, well, first, I just want to make sure that I do state very clearly that bodega arrivals, whether it's east or west, bodega arrivals is a major San Francisco arrival route. So we do want to make sure that there is equity on the west and east. And if I'm correct, and for those who were on the select committee, you can tell me that, but I understand from what I heard during the select committee discussions, the names of Bodega East and Bodega West was used a lot. So, which is why this is addressing it with East and West. Then also in terms of the process, so I would like more clarity in terms of when the committee gives the okay to draft a letter, what would happen in between, because we don't meet again until 2 months later or every other month. It's a long period for us not to have the letter go out. So it would be great for our committee and Chair Inander, if you could help. What is the process in between? Do we have to wait until the next roundtable meeting in order for the letter to be approved? Or will Steve and the Chair, Bernal, review and then approve? How does that work?
I think that question actually applies to both committees. And if I might beg your indulgence, Lydia, that we talk about that after we've disposed of the specific action items for the committee report, and then take that up maybe if we can. And
sure.
That's okay with the chair?
Yes, because it will come up with the pirate item also.
Yep, and it may come up also with Ledge Committee. So let's see, if there are no other objections or questions on this letter, I'll move to the next one, and then we'll come back and make approvals at the end after we've had public comment. With respect to the pirate and CADX, this one, first of all, I want to say thank you, because Lydia has produced the most comprehensive document I can imagine that outlines both what's happened with pirate and also the issues that specifically involve the CADX. And what our original plan was, and our recommendation that was approved, recommendation that came from the technical working group and that was approved by the full roundtable, was to do a follow-up letter to the FAA regarding pirate. As this evolved, what became very clear is that there's really two pieces to this. One is the questions, the follow-up questions to the May response that we got. And those questions require, if it were a naive reader, they would need some background to understand what those questions are. But then separately, we have the issue of our as a technical working group, and perhaps as a roundtable view of how the CADX procedure has been used, and not just with respect to pirate. And I think that's what raises the question here is, do we want to go ahead and send a letter that's focused on the questions and ignore for the moment the whole CADX issue? Do we want to send a letter regarding the questions and then have a separate letter that addresses CADX that's limited to pirate? Or do we want to have a letter potentially that addresses the CADX issue that's broader than pirate, that basically says, this is our experience and our feedback and our concerns with how we have seen CADX applied that would draw on what Lydia's written here, as well as some other information that has, has been discussed and also been provided by some members of our public. So I'd like to get an idea from the roundtable as to whether you want to proceed with one big comprehensive letter, which is what you basically have in front of you, whether you would like to have a separate letter that deals only with the questions as a discrete thing, and then another either letter or activity, because if it's going to be a letter that deals only with pirate cadex, it could go based on an extract of this. But if it's going to be broader about cadex, then I think it needs to come back to the technical working group to be scrubbed and added to. So maybe we could just kind of do a quick go around to all of the members, Chair Bernal, and see what people's preference is. You're muted still.
Thank you. Too many buttons here. I'm not seeing anyone raise their hand right away. There we go, Glenn.
Well, I'm not in the meeting, but I think, if our dealings with the FAA have told us anything, I think being narrow and focused is you're going to be able to get better answers. And then you can go from there, but that's where I would start.
Great. Thank you, Glenn. Anybody else have any comments on this? Seeing none at this time. Oops, I see one more. Lydia.
Being I'm one of the committee members on the technical working group, if I may also recommend that we do narrowly focus and answer the May 22nd letter and then have it go back to the technical working group on the broader issues.
Lisa Matichek.
Thank you. So I agree. I think we need to have separate letters about the different topics. I think it's easier for understanding what we're asking or what we're trying to communicate when you just focus on one point per, or one topic per letter. So I agree with the other folks. Thanks.
I'm looking for any hands raised. Let's see, there's one more. I have to find you. Kathy Watanabe.
Yes, thank you, Chair. And I agree with Lisa Matichek's comment, and I agree separate letters would definitely make it easier and to get responses to, and just keep it focused on what the different issues are. So I concur with that recommendation.
Thank you, Kathy.
Okay, now for clarification, since I'm not seeing anyone else raising their hands of panelists, I see one hand on attendees now, and I imagine I'll see more. Yep, I'm seeing more.
I have one more information item I want to cover, and then we can go, please, to the public comment. And that is that in our last meeting, we had the possibility that the SFO Roundtable and the Oakland Noise Forum might open up the discussions and invite us in with respect to certain procedural discussions they're having. I only want to report that, to the best of my knowledge, there has not been such a specific request or outreach for us to participate. Nevertheless, I did attend the Oakland Noise Forum last week, I think it was, and their discussions were limited to the procedure being developed that for Windsor, which does not seem to have a huge effect or interference with the issues that we were otherwise thought were going to come up under, hush and so on. So I just wanted to report on that. Sure.
Thank you. Thank you. Anita and I did, let's see, we have been in connection with the technical working group with SFO. They have been talking about night procedures. And for that reason, the bodega arrivals could come under that. And so my suggestion is that any opportunity that we get to work in collaboration with them, the more strength we bring to the table. And I will look to the roundtable members to say whether we should go ahead with moving the letter forward having to do with bodega, rather than waiting for SFO to take any action, because it may take some time. I know they are in the process now of reviewing their strategic plan and work plan, and we know how long that can take. So please keep that in mind when we come down to the final directions. The other thing is also, I'm seeing, no, the hand is gone. I would like to think that we will consider assigning technical working group the job of looking at the CADEX and what we can do to address what we find are the deficiencies there. And I want to, again, echo Anita with saying what an amazing job Lydia did and all the work that was back there. And finally, for my final comment on this item is that it's a very, very long letter. Usually more effective letters are 1 or 2 pages at the most. And so I would say, let's get the cover page with the questions involved and then somehow refer to all the assumptions with comments, reference them to our packet if that would be considered. But then also, whether we move that letter forward, whether it's timely or not, I want to have a discussion because I think it's essential that we do look to the technical working group to discuss the CADEX and use Pirate as an example of where things can go a little bit sideways. I see, well, Anita, is there anything that you wanted to say further before I open it up?
If I might frame what I think the questions are before us so that the public can best help us by focusing on what those are.
Yes.
One is, do we do the bodega letter? Or for whatever reason, do we defer that because we want to be participating in some unknown way with what's going on with SFO and Oakland? And then the second one is with respect to Pirate, do we send the short letter with the questions and refer the CADEX issue for development of a broader document that uses Pirate and other things as examples? Or does the public see some other path forward that they prefer we take?
And if I may, excellent summary. If I may add to that, it's a question for Steve Alverson. Have you had an opportunity to read and digest the Pirate letter? And would it be a good idea to actually involve your expertise and make sure that that is involved and included in the letter?
I have reviewed it, Mary Lynn. I'm getting a sense from the roundtable that we might bifurcate the letter into 2 different letters. And if that is the case, then perhaps the direction from the roundtable at the time an appropriate motion would be to have ESA simply separate out the issues related to Pirate and going back to the main letter, have us essentially refine that letter to stand on its own, work with Anita as chair of the technical working group, and then with the roundtable's authorization, send that letter out. Again, if that's the overwhelming feeling of this group, we'd be happy to help in that way.
So a brief summary, we are looking at sending out 2 letters after you review and also setting up technical working group with the CADEX issue with Pirate as an example, correct?
That's what I'm hearing.
Good. Okay, then I will go ahead and open this up to attendees. And Robert Holbrook, as usual, at the top of our list. Please unmute yourself and go ahead. 2 minutes.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, perfect.
I'd like to say first that I'd echo the comments. This was an impressive bit of research, these 2 letters, very thorough and compelling. My thought on the bodega letter is not to wait, get that off soon because there's an urgency. We're in a period right now where flight volumes are low, which would seem to make this shift of traffic back toward the Bodega East leg much more of a slam dunk than it would normally be. I think we should strike while the iron's hot and move forward without slowing down. As to Pirate, I would add one thing. I saw later in the packet a reference from the FAA to their community involvement procedures. And digging into that a little bit, I found the Community Involvement Performance-Based Navigation Desk Guide, published July 2nd, 2018. And Mr. Hendricks, this is as close as I've seen to the kind of document that describes the procedures and processes that the FAA aspires to in rolling out new procedures as anything I've seen yet. And while it presents lots of good ideas, the experience that we've had with Pirate, I think, has been a model of community trying to engage with the FAA, and yet a very frustrating experience in terms of actually having the engagement that we sought. So I think it could be useful, and I'm not, I'm suggesting this more as a brainstorm than anything. It could be useful to compare the Pirate information that was pulled together in this letter with the procedures that are outlined in the Community Involvement Performance-Based Navigation Desk Guide, and highlight specific areas that the FAA might want to consider for improvement as they roll out future procedures. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's see here, participants. Darlene Yapley, please unmute yourself and go ahead. You have 2 minutes.
Number one, I strongly recommend that the bodega letter go out soon. I think that, as you mentioned, the ad hoc committee for planning is just beginning with the SFO roundtable. And if they follow our process, it'll be many months. So there's no need to wait. And when the presentation comes, we will reciprocate and invite them to the presentation. They can ask questions, etc. Number two, I want to make sure that the TWG has approval to actually review the night hush procedure. I know there's been collaboration, but we actually haven't reviewed it in the TWG. And second, that the new OAK procedure, Windsor, that there's authority to review that. Again, just checking that there's no impact on any SCSC roundtable communities. My next item is respond to the narrow May Pirate letter with all the suggestions that Steve had. Get that out the door. But my major recommendation is that we have to broaden the word CADX to be the environmental review process. Pirate touched on CADX, but it also identified some other things about the environmental review process. So from an authority perspective, I would approve the environmental review process that is the next step for a potential letter, which would include CADX and would include community involvement, which may or may not be section 176. But I think the action to go review beyond the May letter as it relates to Pirate and any other procedures related to the larger category of the environmental review process, and let the TWG then come back and decide how they want to slice that up into 1 piece, 2 pieces, or 3 pieces, and so on. But CADX is too narrow. That is the first phase only of the environmental review process. And I think we want to look at the whole thing and then decide the best way to manage that communication. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The next speaker is Marie-Jo Fremont. Please unmute yourself and move ahead. You have 2 minutes.
Thank you. I want to comment on the partial Big Sur overlay that was mentioned at the beginning of this item. I'm very glad to hear that the FAA will not move forward with the procedure until this roundtable has a chance to review it and provide input. One concern I still have, however, is that this request that was made by Anna Eshu's office for the FAA to defer briefings until next year directly canceled the August 11 letter that asked for a detailed response. And it seems that the roundtable was not involved in the request to defer the briefing. So my concern is about the role and empowerment of this roundtable. And this is a sensitive topic because I'm concerned about the lack of transparency because of 2 previous incidents on this procedure. Through FOIA, we, residents, learned that the FAA concluded that the Big Sur overlay recommendation from the Select Committee was not feasible. And this occurred on May 8, 2018. 2018, but it has been hidden from the public since then. And I have 2 letters on this, on the packet, on pages 232 and 255. By the way, my understanding is that Karen Chapman from Anna Eshu's office was not aware of that 2018 conclusion by the FAA. The second incident occurred in June 2019, right after an FAA full working group meeting on this Big Sur overlay. Raquel Gervin, the FAA Western Region Manager, put a communication embargo on the San Francisco community representative, Bert Ganung, who had attended the meeting. So we don't want this partial Big Sur overlay to be another fait accompli. We don't need another parrot. What we need is transparency, and we need this roundtable to be able to monitor the FAA activities. Thank you.
Thank you, Marie-Jo. I see Jennifer Landesman and then Jennifer T. Jennifer Landesman, unmute yourself and go ahead, please. Jennifer?
Hi, Marilyn, sorry. So I'd like to provide can you hear me?
Yes, perfectly. Please go ahead.
Hello? Okay.
Yes, go ahead.
Thank you. I'd like to provide a different view on pirate. We knew everything that there is to know about pirate when the CADX was issued, and we asked our city to appeal. As you see in the CADX documentation, there's a right to appeal. Our city wrote a letter to the SCSC saying that one of the reasons that the city did not appeal is because they did not want to create an appearance to the roundtable that they were moving noise illegally. Nobody has explained that to me yet so far. But the problem here is to try to fix something after the fact. And the role that elected officials have had in not addressing CADXs before they happen. So I don't think it's fair to just say, all these questions later, because it's too late. And so I really want to, I think the roundtable should address that. I've written in a comment about
Jennifer, we cannot understand what you're saying now, unfortunately.
Yeah, we've lost her.
Jennifer, we've lost you. We lost you at about 49 seconds.
I think that packets with 264 pages, my fan, it hasn't, okay, right. I don't know if you can hear me again.
Yes.
Yes.
Proceed, please. Nope. We lost you.
Hello.
Perhaps we can come back to her.
Hi.
After she
I don't know
gets
if you
her
can hear
family
me for
fixed
you
up.
to read. Yeah, they know that. That's fine.
Okay, we'll come back to you and give you another minute after.
Sorry.
Jennifer, are you going to try and speak now? No.
Okay.
Say, give her
Thank you.
a second to fix it.
Sorry, I don't know if you can hear me now.
It's totally broken.
I'm sorry, my phone has like a connection. I'm just going to end on this on the point of having noise maps for the public, and whether that's provided by the FAA, by the roundtables, by anyone who's engaging with the public. I think this is really important. I don't know if you got to hear me on that one, but I thank you all for your work.
Thank you very much. Jennifer T. Sunnyvale, please unmute yourself and go ahead.
Hi, can you hear me?
We do perfectly.
Okay, as far as the bodega letter, I definitely think it should be expedited. As Robert was mentioning, we're in a period with COVID when the volumes of traffic is a lot lower. And so by expediting this, we will kind of be testing the FAA in that we'll see their willingness to work on noise-related issues based on traffic patterns. And I think that's really important. This envelope or ability to test them could close as COVID is solved. So we want to make sure what their willingness is and their motivation to work on noise-related issues, especially when traffic patterns are low. So I definitely would say expedite that letter. On the others, I'm sorry, I was not in the meeting earlier, so I can't comment, but that one I definitely think needs to go out ASAP. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. I don't see any other hands raised. So we'll go back to the members for any further discussion. Anita, is there any statement that you would like to make? We can take the time clock down.
I'm just ready to make motions whenever people are ready to have them.
Is there any further discussion? I mean, we can do it before or after the motions. I hope that somewhere, I don't see anybody's hand raised, so I'm going to pitch in. I hope that whatever we do, we continue to work in collaboration with SFO and Oakland to the extent that they do involve themselves on these noise issues. And I do believe that there is power with collaboration. So I will say that. Now I see, so I'm hoping that, and then hope to have Steve work on the pirate letter because it's very long right now. I'd have to say that for me, with the assumptions and the comments that are included on this, I'm somewhat compromised having come off of the select committee with some of the assertions that were made. So I'm hoping to see a reviewed one that I will be able to sign. And then Lisa, I will go ahead and turn it over to you.
Thank you. I just want to follow up on a comment from Ms. Yapley, and I don't know if Anita, you were going to include this in your list of things to do, but it was also on my list of things to bring up, and that is to have the technical working group follow up on night hush. It's not in the IFP gateway yet, but this could mean about 44% of the flights would be routed over the peninsula. So I feel like this is one where we kind of want to get it before it gets in the IFP gateway, find out more about it, and provide our input on it. So I'd love to add that to your list of things to do. Thanks.
Thank you, Lisa. Lydia Koo.
I would also like to add to Chair Anander's list that when the technical working group reviews the CADEX for pirate, that also looks at the larger term environmental review process. So if that could be added to your motion as well, I'd appreciate that. Then on a second note, in terms of collaborating with our with the San Francisco Roundtable as well as the Oakland Forum, definitely, I think it is most beneficial for us to collaborate. Although on some of the issues we could lead in it and invite the other roundtables and forums to join us when it comes to us. Especially with San Francisco working on their strategic plan and work plan, it's going to take them a little bit more time. But there's definitely we can move forward on some of these items. Thank you.
And if I may, Anita and I have been aware that the FAA did come to the table at SFO, and it was absolutely essential. And I appreciate Anita engaging on that level with them so that we can create that collaboration, especially when they have the advantage of the FAA engaging. It's always wonderful that we can take advantage of that as an entire Bay Area. Glenn, I see your hand raised. Please go ahead.
Yeah, I'm going to be a little bit different. I'm not going to add anything to somebody's list of things to do, but I would just ask that group to prioritize and be focused, and remember we have limited resources to do whatever it is you're going to do. And from my perspective, I'd rather have you do fewer things on your list but get to some kind of completion than to try and do all of them and not achieve any result. It's just a resource, constraint issue. So that's my comment.
So Glenn, are you comfortable with the technical working group taking over the CADEX topic having to do with environmental review and the fact that it is legislated?
I'm fine with all that of what my colleagues are suggesting. I'm just concerned. I think they've got more than they're going to be able to get done given the resources that they have to work with. And I will let them choose of that list of things that they've got to do, what makes the most sense and that we think is going to, be the biggest value to all of our residents, and try and focus on, what may appear to be a subset as opposed to trying to get everything done.
Thank you. Steve Preminger.
Yeah, I would agree with Glenn. I've always appreciated his notion that we should prioritize what we highlight, what we work on, what we say is important, only because we are a finite body, we have finite resources, and all of this is developed with our resources. So as Steve is looking at the letters, reviewing them and all that, I would hope that that would be something he would be concerned about too, including how long it takes him to review the letters.
Thank you. I don't see any further hands raised, and we are now 8 minutes over our deadline, and we haven't gotten to ledge. So
I'm gonna slam through these.
Yes, please.
All right, so the first thing I'd like to do is to move that the roundtable endorse, direct, whatever the right term is, for the chair to send the bodega letter as provided to us.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Lydia is second. Anita is the motion maker. I have to do roll call now. Just a minute. Okay. Cupertino. Yes or no?
I think we lost.
Hello, yes.
Oh, there-
Yeah, I'm
Yeah.
here. Just
You're a yes.
yeah, my phone.
It's good. Mountain
just
View.
disconnected, but
Yes.
my PC is
Mountain
okay.
View, yes. Okay. Palo Alto.
Yes.
Santa Clara.
Yes.
Saratoga. Aye. Sunnyvale.
Yes.
Santa Clara County.
Yes.
Los
I'm not
Altos.
talking.
No,
Yes.
I'm coming. I'm rolling. I'm not in, for some reason, I'm not in alphabetical order on my list. You're a yes. And Los Altos Hills is not present. So the motion passes unanimously with those voting.
Okay, I'd like to make the next motion would be to direct and authorize the chair of the roundtable, the chair of the technical working group, to work collaboratively with ESA to prepare and have the chair send a letter to the FAA regarding the questions in Pirate by extracting, reviewing, revising, and et cetera as needed from the draft that was presented.
Do I have a second? It looks like Lisa is seconding. Okay. Any further discussion, clarification? Okay, roll call. Cupertino.
Yes.
Mountain View.
Yes.
Palo Alto.
Yes.
Santa Clara.
Yes.
Saratoga. Aye. Sunnyvale.
Yes.
Santa Clara County.
Yes.
Los Altos.
Yes.
And Los Altos Hills absent. Unanimous vote. Thank you, with Los Altos absent.
Okay, and then I have a third motion, and that is to direct the technical working group to look at the CADEX and broader environmental review process issue in the light of Pirate as an example, as well as other resources and examples that we're aware of, and to propose either a communication or whatever it feels is appropriate that comes out of that review, understanding that it is possible that a recommendation might come out that would require a referral over to the ledge committee as an option as well.
For legislation.
Yeah.
Yeah, going forward. I see Lydia has seconded. Is there any discussion about the motion? Is it well understood? I don't see anyone commenting or raising their hand, so I'll do roll call. Cupertino.
Yes.
Mountain View,
Yes.
Palo Alto,
Yes.
Santa Clara,
Yes.
Saratoga, yes. Sunnyvale,
Yes.
Santa Clara County.
Sure.
That was yes, okay. Los Altos
Yes.
and Los Altos Hills, absent. Passes unanimously.
And then finally, Chair, I would like to ask that the chair, and in whatever way you need to get concurrence from the roundtable, give direction to the technical working group to pursue cooperative work with SFO and or Oakland Noise Forum on the night procedures and Windsor and whatever else they might be working on that's kind of all falls into that bailiwick that involves sharing the bay, as well as, let's see, I had one other one. I guess weather and bodega, to the extent that that also obviously
Yes.
is involved.
Do I have a second? Lydia is a second. Okay, any discussion on the motion? Good, we'll move forward. Cupertino, oh, Glenn, sorry, thank you.
Yeah, I just want to say here, I plan on voting yes on this, but this seems like just a big expansion of what we're doing. You know, to say here, we're going to be meeting with these other groups that we have enough challenge with meeting with ourselves as a group. I'm back on limited resources and stuff like that. I'm okay with this, but I really want to make sure this is not the beginning of a slippery slope or if it is, that we have a much broader discussion about what our roles and responsibilities and relationships are with these other groups. So I'll vote yes now, but this is on the edge of me for a concern of what it just means of, you know, did we just create a Bay Area regional wide, you know, kind of roundtable working group? And that may or may not be a bad idea, but I think if that's the direction we're really going, I'd like to have a lot more discussion about what it means, but I'll vote yes.
Yeah, but I appreciate that, Glenn, and I'll take note of that concern, and we will keep it in scope, limited to the items that I specified, and would come back here before any other kind of scope increase.
And that is something that has been ongoing now for some time, because we did get an invitation from SFO to participate, especially since the FAA was at the table. Lisa, I see your hand is up.
Yeah, I sort of had a concern about that motion, and that was while we might have had an invitation to participate, I also heard that maybe SFO is working on their work plan. And so I'm a little bit concerned that the motion was to work with them. Does that mean we're not going to do anything on our own? And we would be slowed down by them if they're not ready or don't want to participate? Can we also say we're just going to work on these on our own?
I'm happy to amend the motion to make it clear that should we think it's in the best interest of our roundtable to take an action, that we would certainly come back and recommend that action.
It's also part of our work plan already that it's in there that we will collaborate when possible. Yes.
Right. This is just really, this is just really specifying several topical areas that bound something we want to work on immediately.
Before we move forward, I see the attorney has her hand up. Shantine.
Thank you so much, Chair Bernald, and good afternoon, everyone. I also just wanted to remind here that while the motion could certainly permit less than a quorum or just perhaps the chair of the committee to collaborate with these other groups, we should be careful about having the full body and full committee itself collaborating outside of a public meeting, as that might run afoul of the Brown Act. So just a little reminder here on that, but certainly the committee chair can continue to collaborate and interact and act as a liaison and bring that forth to additional meetings with either the committees or the larger roundtable itself. And that's all. Thank you.
Anybody else's hand raised? At this point, I don't see anybody else. We have a motion and a second, if I believe that's correct. And I will go ahead and call roll. Cupertino.
Yes.
Mountain View.
Yes.
Palo Alto.
Yes.
Santa Clara,
Yes.
Saratoga, yes. Sunnyvale,
Yes.
Santa Cruz, sorry, Santa Clara County,
Yes.
Los Altos,
Yes.
and Los Altos Hills absent. Passes unanimously. Thank you very much. Anita, anything further?
We promised to talk a little bit about process, and that's why I specified in all of these motions the process by which we would get to an endpoint. That's not intended to set a precedent for the future, and I don't know whether you want to take the time or feel that we have the time to discuss that further or not. I just wanted to make that comment since we had said we were going to talk about it.
We said, but we are way over and we haven't gotten in to see if Lisa wanted to talk about anything. We just aren't putting you on the spot, Lisa. We just did that as a placeholder to make sure should anything occur that we would recognize you. So we wouldn't be speaking out of turn on the agenda. I'm not leaving you alone, Anita. I just am trying to do a time check.
So do you want me to go ahead with the ledge report right now?
If you have one.
So we do have a couple things on our plate already, but I think this placeholder here was to follow up on anything that might have been discussed at this meeting that we might want to consider adding to the ledge committee's plate, so to speak. And what I heard was, I think it's appropriate for the ledge committee to have a discussion about dispersion based upon the presentation we heard today, as well as the follow-up information that we were going to receive, as well as input from the public, and determine whether or not any of those ideas are ones we want to follow up on. And I think the ledge committee would determine what we want to follow up on and then bring it back to the full roundtable to say, yes, please do follow up on those. And I heard future technologies such as fine grain dispersion or programmatic dispersion, moving STAR backwards, and optimize GBAS, create more tracks, such as what was done in Charlotte, and then any other ideas that might come up that we heard or we will hear from Chris, or we heard from in the presentation this morning that maybe weren't articulated here. But to give the ledge committee the approval to have a discussion on this and propose to the full roundtable what we would follow up on.
If I may, Steve, can I get your input on that as, in terms of a timeline? We talked about, Steve Alverson, sorry. We talked about getting responses from Chris Sequeira, sorry, and then working from there. Do you have any advice to give us on how we set up ledge?
Yeah, I think Chris's response is going to be fairly quick. And I'm hoping that I can report back to you, Madam Chair, tomorrow or Friday on the timing of that. And then perhaps from there we can let Lisa know where we are from a timing standpoint to let Ledge Committee go ahead and meet.
Okay, do we need to make a vote that we can give permission for Ledge to meet regarding this topic as we have to technical working group on theirs?
Yes, that would be appropriate.
Okay.
That would be appropriate.
Okay, and now we also have the question of process, because I think this wraps around for both committees, and that's why I've pushed it to the end. We'll keep you, Lisa, on the hook for voting to approve you having a legislative subcommittee meeting. And Anita, I would like you to make a statement regarding process and what your question is regarding the process or motion.
It's something that was brought up by others. It wasn't my topic, but I'll just comment that I think we have the issue of how to move expeditiously when we're only meeting every 2 months. And early on, that's one of the reasons we set up the working committees, because we thought, okay, we'll get things going faster. But by the time we assign a task, if there's a task assigned, you have the authority to do that in between meetings on some sort of exception basis. But if we wait for a meeting and assign us, and then we meet, and then we have to come back and get a final approval, we are always going to take between 2 and 4 months to get anything done. And I think we need to find a way to move more quickly in the event that there's something happens that needs to be moved more quickly than that.
The only response that I have is because my name is on the bottom line of the letter. And if I haven't seen what you have passed and we haven't reviewed it as a body, and I have an issue with, say, one sentence that's in it, it creates an awkward situation for me. So I don't know exactly how to walk through that. Steve Preminger, I see you have raised your hand. Do you have a comment on that?
Well, yeah, I just have a concern, again, not to quote Glenn again, but, if we're prioritizing our activities, we shouldn't get a lot of stuff that comes rushing up that we're going to try to be reactive to. If we really have a game plan, we're trying to get some specific gains, I think we need to be very certain about what we're moving in on. My other point would be that committees are to make reports directly to the full body, and I appreciate that causes a long delay. I think unless there's some way to have a check and balance where the chair, maybe by emergency basis, working with our consultant, gives input or reviews it and gives a final say, then I'm uncomfortable trying to short circuit the whole process. Otherwise, we could just do all our work by subcommittee.
Yeah. Shantine, I see you will have raised your hand.
Thanks, Chair. I appreciate it. Yeah, I want to echo your concern, Chair, because you are signing these letters. I think it does need, all of the letters do need to pass your and get your permission on it. The other issue is that ultimately, if the roundtable wants to approve certain actions in the interim, they can do so as the full body. To echo Mr. Preminger's concern, I think the bylaws, as well as how things are currently set up, do require that the legislative committee and the technical working group direct issues to the roundtable for certain decisions. That being said, for matters such as, let's take the bodega letter, something that's already been prepared, it's got your sign off, more or less, you can approve by the full body as you did today to have it worked on further in the future and then sent out without having to meet again. So it's really up to the roundtable or the full body how they want to ensure that these processes are followed. And for example, issue by issue, you could make a motion and have it pass that would allow you to move more expeditiously in the interim, or you can make a larger motion that, if there are these emergency issues, maybe you'll permit emergency meetings in the meantime. The real issue, though, is to make sure that the entire roundtable body is approving things that go out with your name on it, Chair, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Okay. The next one, I have Liang's hand up.
Oh, I guess I'm making similar point. I think there are two options. The roundtable can authorize the legislative committee to come up with letter, provided that the chair review the letter before it goes out. And the second option is we can always call a special meeting because we don't meet frequently. We can do a special 15 minutes meeting just for a letter. With the virtual meeting now should be doable. Thank you.
Thank you. Steve Preminger, your hand is still up. Shantine, your hand is still up. Steve Preminger, did you wish to say anything? Okay, Liang, you've said what you needed to. If you would lower your hand, that'd be great. All right, Anita, response to that, and then we really need to move forward.
It seems to me that if you task something to a committee on an expedite basis, that we ought to try and find a way, if we don't have one right now, that would then allow you and the committee chair, after the committee has worked, and Steve, with Steve's advice, to reach final on a letter. And then if we think that it is of some sort of magnitude that the whole roundtable should really see it, then I think having a quick special meeting is useful to do that. Especially we can do them this way and they're pretty quick. And then otherwise, I think that we ought to do it based on what the topic is, because sometimes the topics are more urgent than others. And at least in the way our city works, I don't know that we're any different than anybody else, but could be, that we sometimes assign work to be done and it doesn't come back to the whole council. It gets done and handled and the mayor's allowed to sign it and it goes out. But we, on an individual assignment basis, determine what the sign-offs and approvals need to be. So I don't know whether that's an option for us or not.
Due to the time, I think there's an awful lot of discussion that we still need to have. And I did promise that I would let Lisa's motion move forward. I don't want to shun this aside. I think it's something that we definitely need to look into. And I would like to be able to confer with Steve and possibly with legal to make sure that we're going the right direction. Yeah. I'm hoping that with that idea, we don't need to make a motion on that one and that we can give the time over to Lisa to make her motion with your approval, Anita. Yes, I'm saying not.
My approval.
Okay, thanks.
We are co-equal chairs.
Lisa, what is your motion?
Yeah, so the motion is to assign to the Ledge Committee to have a discussion on the topic of dispersion based upon the presentation we heard today and the follow-up information that we are going to get from Chris and the input we've heard from the public today, and if there's any other input, and have the Ledge Committee decide which, if any, we want to work on, and then propose that to the full roundtable.
I see Glenn giving you a second. I'm going to do a roll call. Cupertino.
Yes.
Mountain View.
Yes.
Palo Alto.
Yes.
Santa Clara.
Yes.
Saratoga. Yes. Sunnyvale.
Yes.
Unincorporated Santa Clara County.
Yes.
Los Altos.
Yes.
And Los Altos Hills. Absent. Passes unanimously with the without Los Altos Hills in attendance. Okay, are we good to continue? Because we are over time and we are on item number 5. This is the ad hoc committee report.
Hey, Mary Lance, Steve, just
Yes.
a quick question. We didn't have public comment on Lisa's item, and I just wanted to see if we did have any members of the public that wanted to comment on her motion.
Thank you for catching that. I see one hand. I'm not seeing who it is just yet. Jennifer Landisman, 2 minutes.
Hi, it's more of a question than a comment. Can you hear me?
Yes,
Okay.
please go ahead.
So I would like to know, there's the technical committee that asks about specific procedures, and there's a legislative committee that follows up on legislation, which is generally like a multi-year process, right? And then there are procedural issues that relate to items that are, for example, on environmental review. I think that when you have I think a lot of the work that the legislative committee is involved with has to do with some of the stuff that the technical committee is doing, for example, on environmental review and so forth. So I was just wondering if there's like a mid in between technical and legislative, or if there could be a home for something that is not necessarily specific procedures and not multi-year.
We've lost her. I don't hear Jennifer.
having these noise maps, for example, that I don't know, a tool to communicate with the public so that it's not just words and 250 page packets. And I don't know where that is housed within the roundtable. And so I'd like to know if the legislative committee may have a home for it, or the technical committee may have a home for it. But there are tools that can help better engagement with the public, and they're not being used. And I'm very concerned about that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, we've Steve Alverson, is there any comment you would like to make in response?
No, I have no specific comment on it.
Thank you very much. Then we will move on to item number 5, ad hoc committee report. It's regarding an update with the ad hoc committee's exploration of the possibility of the roundtable becoming independent from Cities Association in response to the Cities Association Executive Board request. Shantine, I see that you think you're having technical problems, but we're hearing you loud and clear. Given the fact that the item is on our agenda as a result of an action Cities Association has taken, I would like you to please give us a presentation.
Chair Bernal, thank you. There is no presentation at this point. As explained previously, during prior Cities Association meetings, we will await the roundtable recommendation on how they will move forward, either at the December meeting or the January meeting. And that will be, at that point, the Cities Association Executive Board and Board will make a determination, and there will be additional collaboration. There's nothing further at this point from the Cities Association.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the last sentence before Cities Association sentence. It was garbled.
There will be no determination or any other kind of recommendation or discussion from the Cities Association until the December or January presentation from the roundtable on how the table would like to move forward with their independence, whether that's finding another fiscal agent or setting themselves up as their own fiscal agent, or assessing a JPA. In the letter that the roundtable recently produced, there was also a pending action item on the joint venture Silicon Valley subject, and we will also await any further information from the roundtable on how that is proceeding and whether that would be a happy home for you all.
Okay, thank you very much. Glenn Hendricks, please.
Okay, hello everybody. So what I believe was included in everybody's packet, and you have an opportunity to read, is the subcommittee has come up with a draft recommendation of what to do, or what we're recommending to be able to try and work and come up with a plan with the Cities Association. I think Shantine was dancing around the answer pretty clearly, is that the Cities Association has pretty much said they would like us to find somewhere else to go. And in the evaluation of taking a look at what the other options are, it is our assessment right now that there's no other financially viable location for us to go to. And when I'm done, I can let Mary Lynn, she's been more kind of on that side if people have questions about this, but I'm going to try and keep this as a little bit at a high level. So the committee, we've tried to take a look at what were the actual concerns that the executive board of the Cities Association had, and could we come up with a solution that would let us still fit up underneath the Cities Association. So I believe this draft recommendation has been sent to the Cities Association. It's in your packet, and I'm really just going to go through the first page. This is set up as just kind of the first page is kind of an executive summary, and then there's more detail that's behind it. And I think really what we're interested from you is kind of at the high level kind of policy stuff, not nit for nit word. If you have that stuff, you can certainly tell it to us, but you can always send that to Mary Lynn and we can continue to evolve. But I'm really trying to stay at the the macro level of what it is.
Glenn, I'm sorry, I don't find it in the packet. Can you give me a page number? I find all the Cities Association correspondence, but not something back from you guys.
I'm going to let Steve or somebody else, because I didn't actually, shuffle everything together. So, Steve?
I can respond in some way. You might have to go into an additional later edition of our packet. We got the notice from Andy on Wednesday afternoon. It took a little bit of regrouping for the ad hoc to be able to respond. We started working from Friday through Sunday and finally sent it out on Monday morning because there was an awful lot that needed to be finalized.
So it came out on Monday morning from whom, please?
From ESA to you all. And then there was an addendum that was added Tuesday as a result of my conversation with Joint Venture Silicon Valley. Glenn, do you want to go over briefly just the problem statement and the summary of recommendations?
Yeah, and maybe somebody could email her a copy of it. I mean, I'm just looking at, because I have a copy of it. So, so what we did was we went ahead and said, what's the problem statement we're actually trying to solve? Which is that the Cities Association wishes to reduce to almost eliminate any amount of the time that they're allocating toward providing services to us as a roundtable. The Cities Association needs to find a way to minimize any liability if they're the overarching umbrella for us. We as a roundtable, we wanted to be able to exercise a little bit more independence and oversight in the definition of how we are managing our contractors. And then we want to make sure we're meeting all the legal requirements. But the first issue we're really trying to deal with is that top bullet of reducing the amount of time that the Cities Association is having to spend on this project. And so the summary of recommendations really comes down to 5 specific things. Is that to eliminate the Cities Association having to spend any time, is we would go ahead and we would hire a separate program coordinator to do all those kind of project related things in the time that the Cities Association was spending actually helping with the roundtable. We would actually continue and have legal counsel, what Shantine has been doing. And when we do that, the roundtable would be paying for the legal piece. But if we're going to be underneath the Cities Association, we need to kind of build a little bit of a matrix management piece so that the legal aspect could go ahead and report up and be providing what they need to provide as that oversight to the Cities Association. The real piece is we want to go ahead and have the Cities Association be that fiscal agent, just handle those bookkeeping things and stuff like that of what's there. There has been an issue of the Cities Association feels they're not the staff, but the actual Cities Association members are having to field too many comments from the public, too many comments from the congressional offices, and too many comments from we as elected officials on this roundtable into the Cities Association directly. So as part of doing this, we would stop all of that. We would not be contacting the Cities Association to talk to them about different things. They would go through the chair and through the legal person and the program coordinator. And then obviously we would have to create a transition plan to get from the current structures that we have today and how this is all set up to put it into the new model of what we're taking care of. And we think this would go ahead and this would reduce the amount of time that the Cities Association is having to spend dealing with us. There'd be this small sliver of what is the actual not oversight, but umbrella structure they're giving to us. We would provide the legal oversight to help make sure we do reduce and minimize any exposures they have. And then this clearly defined legal and role and responsibility structure would allow us to continue to operate. Because as I said, and Mary Lynn can go into any detail of what she wants, but we've looked at a variety of things, and they're just not financially viable because they're going to want too much money to go ahead and provide the services, and or there are certain options we took a look at that other umbrella group, they might want to take over the whole responsibility and give us different kind of marching orders and directions than what we feel we have. So that's just kind of a quick thing. We have more detailed breakout of what each one of these steps is. I don't know if Mary Lou wants to add anything or Kathy does, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Glenn. That was a very good sky-high overview of the work that we have put in. And I do have to give credit to Glenn for coming up with the problem statement and moving forward in that way, and to Kathy Watanabe for being my proofer and my cheerleader, and also some staff help from the city of Saratoga. What has happened over this time is that as soon as we were beginning to get letters and notification that Cassie might want us to go elsewhere, I began to, and even before that, I have been looking for a new home for us. In 2019, Lisa Matichek and I met with the San Jose Airport Director, John Aiken, Matt Kazmerzak, Vice Mayor Chappie Jones, and the San Jose Council member, Raul Perales. At that point, we have shared with you the reaction, and that was a big no. Refusal of San Jose Airport to sponsor, refusal of San Jose City Council to join the roundtable unless given a proportional representation based on population. So that pretty much went out the window. In July of this year, I had a teleconference with County Supervisor Joe Simitian and aide Chris Zanardi. I requested that we look to see if we could possibly get county sponsorship, legal representation, and or a roundtable coordinator. Nothing came out of that beyond a conference call with legal counsel later on, and I'm still waiting for them to come back after several rounds of attempts to talk to them. On this July of this year, I had a teleconference with Fabi Garcia and Tamara Swan. I requested the confirmation that the FAA will still recognize us even with the departure of Santa Cruz County, and they confirmed that that would happen. They also, I inquired about the status of other roundtables and was quite surprised to learn that every other roundtable in the nation has an airport as a sponsor. And I also asked if there were any other known options for setting up the roundtable as we exist today. The FAA said that they will continue to recognize us and agree that we are a legitimate body as long as members of SFO and SJC airport staff attend our meetings. The FAA does not get involved with the formation of roundtables and knows of no other status. So in July of 2020, I had a meeting with Cupertino City Manager Deb Fang, who has been working in her previous life with NASA, and I had a couple of requests. I said, what are the possible alternatives to being under the umbrella, alternatives to CASI? Would it be a JPA? Would it be joint venture Silicon Valley? Would it be an individual city acting as a fiscal agent for the roundtable? The response was the JPA is too structured to meet the needs of a roundtable due to state mandates and the fluid nature of the roundtable membership, which we have certainly seen this year. It is not in the wheelhouse, she said, of joint venture Silicon Valley. And she said, having a single city serve as the fiscal agent would create an optics problem because of the differing needs of each city. And so she said that the preferred status, in her opinion, would be remain with CASI. We had another discussion that was given the community and member participants makeup. The SCSC roundtable should seek out its own legal counsel. As I indicated before, in August, I had a teleconference with legal counsel Chris Sheridan and Steve Mitra. I am still looking to see what possibilities may, or I was still looking to see what possibilities might exist. During that discussion, I did learn that county legal counsel does represent various agencies, public agencies such as ours. They do have experience in municipal law. They would need to have well-defined parameters and create a firewall. They would need to contract separately with us. and their rate schedule for their attorney is $264 an hour. The paralegal rate is $116 an hour. In September 25th, I had a telephone conversation with CPA Paul Resnikoff, who some of us know is an elected official from Campbell. I was referred to him because I understand he has set up 501c3s, and so I asked him about the nature of how you go about setting up a 501c anything. And what the process would be to procure one. His report was the timeline is a long one. It could be up to a year. We would file with the IRS, possibly online, receive a letter of determination. Then we would need an attorney to redo our bylaws, look into reorganizing us as an association, and the cost could range between, in his opinion, $5,000 to $10,000, and would include substantial attorney fees. After receiving a letter from Andy at the end of last week, with a request that, or an indicated request that I contact Joint Venture Silicon Valley. At the time that I turned in this, I had requested scheduling and then had a discussion with Russ Hancock on Monday or Tuesday. I'm sorry, everything is sliding together. With Joint Venture Silicon Valley, I have included their web pages that say how they work. I think it's important to point out Joint Venture provides a neutral forum for collaborative regional thinking and leadership from both the public and private sectors. They work in teams on their current initiatives. And the life cycle of an initiative is it begins with a specific mission and identifiable goals, and then these initiatives are carried out to their logical conclusion. Others, after incubation by joint venture, ultimately transfer to partner organizations for long-term administration. What I did discover in the discussion with Russ Hancock was that they would expect us to sever ties with CASI cities. They then would become the fiscal agent and oversee our project or program. They would hire a program manager who would then become part of their administrative staff. That manager would then provide the infrastructure and the office. The program manager would hire an attorney. For these services, joint venture would take 15% off the top when they come in, when we go in the door. The rest would be allocated to the roundtable. Our roundtable work would become a joint venture project. They would convene public meetings. He believes that this venture has opportunity to enlarge their economic development base. He mentions that the San Jose Airport Aviation Director, John Aiken, is already serving on their board. And at that point, I did point out the fact that there was a little bit of a discrepancy between our level, where the planes are up here, and John Aiken's and economic development is down here on the ground. And the only connection with that is when our airplanes, the airplanes land, and that's it. This is not an economic proposal. And I did stress that this was an ongoing permanent venue as we were set up. The pros for that would be we could possibly remain viable, whether we were then actually, according to our mission, responsible directly to our constituents as elected officials. I have great questions about that. And if we are given direction to move ahead with talks about that, that's something that would definitely have to be covered. The cons I noticed is we would become an initiative. The reason for our being is set up as elected officials, as I said, responsible to our constituencies. After that, today I had a conversation, a brief one, with Karen Chapman. She recommended that we still pursue trying to find a place with SFO. After that, this morning, I had a conversation with an attorney that I have met through my being on a JPA. and I discussed the availability and possibility of that attorney. It was, I believe, a very fruitful conversation. I think we as an organization now need to have you as the full body look into what you believe our best avenues for the future would be. And with that in mind, I'll open it up to any discussions from any of the members of our roundtable, if you have questions. I know that was like lightning speed dating, right?
So, Mary Lynn, this is Glenn. If I can just go ahead and, add while people are thinking for a second, is that, I think Mary Lynn kind of, framed up very well this issue we have of there's not lots of places for us to go ahead and go and reside. And we have this challenge that, the Cities Association said they'd like us, they've not really said they like it, they just said, here, you need to go somewhere else. And I think what we're looking for is, dialogue, and that we need to go ahead. I think the next step that needs to happen is for us to be able to actually have the subcommittee have a direct conversation with the Cities Association, whether it's the full board or the executive board. So, because there have been a lot of back and forth, side dialogues. And I think we need to get, in a room and really hear and see, have we addressed their concerns and would it work, and, those kind of things. And we're just looking to see if you guys have any other thoughts or ideas to go ahead and do that. And I want to reiterate, the whole reason that we're in this problem is because we can't tuck in under the San Jose airport, because that is the way every other airport roundtable in the country is structured. So, I mean, if we could solve that problem magically, that would make all this other stuff go away. So that's just kind of where we're at.
Kathy Watanabe.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you, Glenn. And thank you for allowing me to be a part of the discussion and be your cheerleader, and, as well as your proofreader. And actually, I think I found another error today while I was reading it again. So anyway, no, this is definitely, it's an important issue because so much has gone into to get to where we are today. And Mary Lynn, thank you for all your efforts. I know that the synopsis that you just gave over the last few months does not really express all the time and effort and frustration that you have experienced over the last couple of months. I mean, you've just taken this all upon your shoulders, and I know you're the chair, but still, it's been an awful lot. And so, but thank you very much for doing all of that. And it just shows, I mean, what, just how much you care about this issue. That being said, it's frustrating to hear, just all the different groups that you have approached and come up against just not being able to find a resolution. But I was hoping that maybe joint ventures could possibly be an option. But then, as you were talking again now, or Glenn, and just brought up the fact about how the fact is that we're in this position because we don't have an airport. Is it worth it to go back to the John Aiken or Matt and have a chat again? I don't know if they're listening to us, but is it worth it to go back and just explore it again and see if there is any opportunity? I mean, sooner or later they're going to have to talk. If they don't talk to Santa Clara, they're going to have to talk to us. And it just seems like maybe I'm just thinking maybe the sooner the better. So if it's possible, once you hear back from Larry and Mariko regarding the documents that have just been sent to them, get response back from Cities Association, that I would think, I'm just thinking out loud, the possibility of approaching San Jose Airport again and talking to Matt and John Aiken and just having another dialogue with them about this issue. those are my thoughts. But thank you again for all that you've done, Mary Lynn.
Thank you, Kathy. Liang, I see you have your hand raised.
Hi. Yeah. So I see that the San Francisco Roundtable is financially backed by both the county, San Mateo County, and the airport. I know that San Jose Airport is not cooperating, but could we put more pressure on the county, at least put the item on their board agenda for discussion, and all of us, each city, talk to our county representative and all the residents who are, I think we have a lot of resident support. This is a very important issue for a lot of them. So that's all right to the county supervisors, so that this is really their responsibility that they should have taken up early on. They haven't. Now we have a good structure. They should really take on the responsibility of coordination.
Thank you, Liang. I really appreciate all the new ideas that we get. The
Yeah,
unfortunate
and
part
yes,
is,
thank you so much
Yeah.
for for your effort. You have done amazing amount of outreach. And another idea is congressman. I wonder, I think we do have support of Rokana and in the issue. So is it possible that we could be a committee under either of the congressmen? It may not, there may not be such a committee that exists, but we can, of course, create one.
Thank
How
you,
is that?
Liang.
Thank you. Yeah.
I really appreciate all the ideas that are coming in. Unfortunately, number one, where San Francisco is in San Mateo County, the county can have some influence and has had it for the roundtable up there. In the case of the San Jose Airport, we are not bound in any way, shape, or form, or they are not with the county. They are definitely under the city of San Jose. And it is the city of San Jose that gives or takes away approval for that sort of thing. So that was definitely what was explored early on when we first started out, and there had been the hope that we could go there. The other item that you brought up, I certainly appreciate hearing about you believing that our congressional representatives support us, and they do. And I have gotten that commitment over and over. Unfortunately, it is not in the wheelhouse of the congressionals. In fact, it's absolutely forbidden for them to set up a roundtable of any sort. I believe that should we pursue things with San Francisco Airport, that they would be very helpful with us if we were to do that. So right now it looks like we are in a bit of a time crunch, thanks to Cities Association saying that at one point saying that they want us out by January. I didn't quite hear that from Shantine today, but there are plans. The first plan that we have labeled as A is the one that Glenn Hendricks just presented and is in your packet. The next plan could very well be going back to San Francisco Airport. The next plan after that could be setting up a 501c something or other.
Oh, wait. I think my main point is we should be under County of Santa Clara.
But we aren't.
And in
we
terms
just
of,
aren't.
yeah, so can we advocate harder for the county supervisors
Steve,
to
would you like to
acknowledge us
answer
as
that?
a community? Is it
Steve?
not at all possible?
It's not possible. Steve Preminger, would you like to speak to that?
Because Joe Smithian is just one member, right?
So if I can go ahead and say, I think what I think we should do is let's try and have a discussion with the Cities Association and see where they're at. If they just come back and say here, flat out, no, they're not interested in this, then we're going to have to explore some of these other ideas. But just because we might think that we'd be a good fit under the county, they may not think that, regardless of how much we might advocate. I mean, they've already been pretty clear about that. San Jose has been pretty clear about it, and other things like that. So I think I'm making a list of all these other things we could do. But before we get too far down the path of going down those roads, I think we need to be able to have a discussion with the cities association. And to me, they have a series of concerns, and we'd like to be able to try and have a dialogue and a discussion with them to go, here, have we addressed those concerns? Did we almost get there? Could we go ahead and just tweak this a little bit and maybe get it done? And if not, then we're in a whole different kind of ballgame, because all the ideas you're talking about, we could go explore lots of things, but they're all low probability, not impossibilities, but they're low probabilities of occurring. And in my analysis and being in all this, I think our best, highest probability is to have that interactive discussion with the cities association and find out if we're close or if we've just completely missed the ball. And then we'll figure out where we're going to go and which of these other possibilities might make the most sense to explore in more depth.
That's right. I see Shantine's hand is raised.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to clarify, and this is something that the City Association has specified multiple times. It is not that by January that the Cities Association will declare they're no longer your fiscal agent. It is, they've asked for presentation by December, January on the Roundtable's plan to move forward towards independence. So you mentioned, Madam Chair, a time crunch. Yes, I understand that this year is zooming by, but what the Cities Association has asked for is a plan by that period, and not, and they have not stated definitively that their position is to rescind their fiscal agency full stop at that point. There is still the request from the Cities Association to hear you all out and hear about your plan, as Glenn was saying, to further understand what your possibilities are looking forward. And again, if you do talk to Joint Venture Silicon Valley and that proves fruitful, they would obviously and encourage a discussion about this and a plan about this in December or January.
Okay, thank you. Okay. We are quite behind time. Steve Alverson, what would you recommend?
Well, it certainly would be good to have some sort of consensus from the group about the direction that they'd like to head, given what the ad hoc committee has recommended so far. And then if there's a possibility, as Glenn had suggested, to dialogue with the Cities Association, that would be the next step after that.
Okay. Glenn, would you like to make a motion or a recommendation?
Do we want to hear, do we need to do any?
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Yes, and I see Jennifer Landesman. Jennifer, please go ahead. If it turns out I cannot hear you, I'm going to have to, for time's sake, ask that you perhaps just type us a note in the chat.
Okay, thanks. Regarding San Francisco Airport, there's been there used to be an arrivals technical committee, and long-term, I mean, I'm really shocked that the airports are not dealing with noise in the Metroplex and that everybody has their own interests. I think that needs to be addressed. But if SFO is willing to work with communities that are affected by arrivals, then maybe there could be something interesting to pursue on, in that manner. I think departures and arrivals have very different issues. And so I would recommend that. And also just to say thanks for all of your efforts to try to find a way. I also think that the FAA should be more involved, because this is just a really awkward situation they've put citizens in. First of all, just sort of dumping the noise, and then nobody taking responsibility for it and putting elected officials in this situation. So thank you.
Thank you. Robert Holbrook. Ask to unmute. I can't unmute you.
There, can you hear me?
Yes, perfectly.
Okay. First, thank you very much for all your efforts on this, Chair Bernal. They're much appreciated. Second, I'll be brief. I wonder if a path forward might not be to indicate an interest in going down the 501c path with the cities association and begging their indulgence to work out something for maybe the 9 months or a year that it would take to get that thing set up. If there's a funding issue, perhaps we could go back to some of the cities and ask for an extra 10,000 or so from them to bridge us until the coronavirus is passed and budgets are under less pressure. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay. Glenn?
So I think the motion would be is to the board, to the Roundtable Committee to authorize the subcommittee to engage in a direct dialogue with the Cities Association using the framework structure that we're recommending, and it may evolve a little bit.
I would add to that if you would accept that we do that perhaps with a mediator or facilitator.
Okay.
Okay. I'm happy to second.
Thank you, Kathy Watanabe.
You're welcome, Mary Lynn.
Any further discussion among the members? Are we ready for a vote? Okay, here we go. Cupertino.
Sorry, a question. So with the mediator, would that add to the cost?
I don't know about that. We're hoping to get somebody in that could help facilitate it. I don't know whether it would be out of Cities Association budget or ours. That's something that'll go forward. Just understanding that would be something that we would try to use as a method of achieving consensus. If I remove it, are you able to vote for it?
I'm concerned about the cost of, since we are already tight on budget, right?
No. Well, I'll remove it from the motion.
No, please don't.
Okay.
The thing is,
and Cupertino, aye or nay?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. I hope you don't feel rushed by that. It's just time. And we can take this offline and discuss it with you later. Mountain View.
Lisa had to leave.
Lisa had to leave. She has written me a note. She likes the plan we've all put together. It's worth a conversation with Cities Association. I think we can take that as an aye. Steve, if you're comfortable with that, Steve.
No, since she's not here.
I agree. It is. Yeah,
okay, thank you. Thank you.
That is not.
Okay, then we count her as absent, correct? We count her as absent.
Yes, that's correct.
Mountain View gone. Palo Alto.
Yes.
Santa Clara.
Yes.
Saratoga. Yes. Sunnyvale.
Yes.
Santa Clara County.
Yes.
Los Altos.
Yes.
And Los Altos Hills absent. Passes unanimously. Thank you very much.
And thank you.
Knowing that there are 2 absences.
2 absences, yes. Thank you for the clarification. The absences from Mountain View and from Los Altos Hills. We now come to oral communications, public comment. Speakers are limited to a maximum of 2 minutes. We are now at 4:01. And I have one person that is asking to speak. Steve, 2 people. Are we able to comply with the Zoom limitations?
Yes.
Okay. Jennifer Landesman, not anything on the current agenda.
Yes, at the last San Francisco Roundtable meeting, there was an update on GBAS. And San Francisco keeps saying that they will not do GBAS if there is negative impact. But to this date, in the 2 years we've been asking, there's no definition for the term impact. There's been no request from this roundtable to ask for updates on GBAS. I've encouraged SFO Noise Office to come to the roundtable and give us the same updates. The FAA has also given an update on their new portal for noise complaints. where part one is how they're going to intake complaints and part two is what they're going to do about the complaints. And they have not gone to that part two yet. I think that that's where citizens should be able to provide input, what we would like them to do with our complaints. And SFO is also trying to change intake on complaints. This affects Mid-Peninsula cities greatly. And there has been no update. So I just don't see how this roundtable is not being made aware of any of this or asking for any updates. So I would encourage that. But ultimately, this is all about noise, and all of the official agents that interact with the public have done very little to actually work with the communities and work with citizens and engage with the public effectively with the tools that, by the way, our tax dollars have paid for, which are modeling tools and all of the tools that the FAA has. And they're available. They take probably, you know, a noise map takes less time than to write 265 pages about a procedure or several procedures. So I encourage the roundtable to focus on noise, which is what this whole issue is about, and to work with state-of-the-art tools and not, you know, these Q&As that are just without any pictures. Thank you.
Thank you. Robert Holbrook. You need to unmute yourself, please.
Can you hear me?
Yes, perfectly.
Okay, thank you. Again, I'll be brief. In the interest of getting things done, I'd suggest that that the roundtable have a brief discussion that sets the expectation that the working groups can send letters to the FAA and others requesting clarification without returning to the roundtable for approval. And maybe these letters could even be signed by the chair of the committee if that made someone feel more comfortable. I think that if we had that discussion, then that could just be a standing policy and it would move things along. Second, Steve's report on the IFP gateway showed that the FAA is planning on changing two procedures that affect South Flow traffic over Cupertino, Mountain View, and Sunnyvale. We don't know what the scope of the change is. Maybe it's trivial, but perhaps Steve or perhaps some other group could remind the FAA of our interest in those procedures and encourage them to communicate with us before the change is posted to the IFP gateway. Because as we know from experience, the later in the process we intercept something like this, the harder it is to work with the FAA to change. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I don't see anyone else's, any other attendees' hands. All right, I will close oral communication. All right. We now have come to item number 7, member discussion. Is there any member who would like to speak? On anything? Glenn Hendricks.
Yeah, so I want to be very careful about how I try and say this, but I think at some point, you know, I would like to be able to have a discussion and understand the congressional office's role in what we're doing and how the letter went to the FAA that said we should stop hearing reports. I am completely understanding of the fires and issues and things that have gone on, but, and I understand hierarchically where the congressional offices sit, but I would have felt a little bit better if there had at least been some kind of conversation between the congressional office and our chair or something, you know, a heads up of what was going on. And so I'll probably stop there because I think we're all done for today. But at some point, I think I'd like to be able to have some kind of discussion about that where we have time to take a look at what roles and responsibilities are with all that. And I'm hoping that the congressional offices, when it's the appropriate time, they're going to send the letter that says, hey, Mr. and Mrs. FAA, start spending more time with us because that's what we need to go ahead and do. So that was just my comment.
Thank you. Lydia, I see you have raised your hand.
I would second Glenn if we were doing a motion.
Thank you.
You guys will figure out how to do the agenda stuff. I don't need a motion, but I just wanted to put that out there that I think a discussion at some point would be appropriate.
Agreed.
Real good, real good. In the many of our council meetings, member discussion is something that is exactly what just happened. As a result of the meeting, we bring something forward and just propose it, but we do not discuss anything. And I am putting it out there, not as any attempt to remove the ability of the community to have public comment, but for us to begin to look at how we actually define what member discussion means on our agenda. And so I'm putting that out there as an idea too. And I don't know if there's anybody else that wants to bring anything else up that is new or that they would like to have proposed for the future. Steve, is there anything that you would like to comment on at this point?
Yes, Madam Chair. Robert Holbrook in his last comment addressed this point, but Lisa Matichek had to leave early. She was chairing a meeting that started at 4 o'clock and asked if, in fact, for me to raise it, that the roundtable could look into asking the FAA for information on the 2 items that were on the IFP gateway that Robert mentioned. They're on page 5 of the packet, and they're San Jose items 2 and 3 regarding RNAV on 12 left and 12 right. And she asked if I could bring that up and have us essentially look into it.
Great.
Yes, please.
Thank you.
And not wait for another meeting, but if there is information available, is there a legal way that it can be put on the website and distributed to the roundtable?
Yeah, and I'll reach out to the FAA.
Wonderful, thank you. Any further items for our meeting today? Okay, I will just again thank Glenn and thank Kathy and thank all of you for your hard work. I deeply appreciate everything that each and every one of you does to contribute to this organization. I believe full-heartedly that we are providing a tremendous and necessary service to our communities. And for that, I thank you from the bottom of my heart.
Thank you, everyone.
Yes.
Motion to adjourn?
Yes, that's. And
Thank you,
Lydia is
everyone.
waiting. Yes, and Steve, was that it? Good?
Bye.
Thank you. Only 9 minutes over. New record.
Yay.
Woo, woo.
Thank you all.
Thank you. Bye.